City Clerk, would you take the roll, please?
Alderman Revelle? I'm sorry, I already start. Alderperson Revelle. I told you I'm not stopping. Alderperson Rainey. Alderperson Fleming. Alderperson Fisk.
Okay, so we're just going to keep it. That was a special we were doing the other day, so we'll just keep it with Alderman for now. And if the folks up here want to change the official name, we'll change it, Clerk Reed. So, all right, continue on.
Alderman Braithwaite. Alderman Nguyen.
You here?
Alderman Wilson. Thank you.
All right.
Alderman Ruth Simmons.
Here.
Alderman Sufferton.
All right, great. We have a quorum. We have everybody here. Welcome to the Monday, March 18th, 2019 Evanston City Council meeting. A few announcements to start things off. First off, a big congratulations to the ETHS boys basketball team, who for the first time I think in 35 years was in the state championship game. They lost a tough game, but second best in the state, and they won their conference championship. The girls basketball team, I would also note, won the conference championship, the South Championship. Let's hear it for them. And they were in the Sweet 16. So, boys, girls basketball doing great. If we had time, I'd go through everything, because I talked to Dr. Witherspoon today. I said, give me some of the other stuff that's going on at ETHS. And I've got about 4 pages of incredible accomplishments by our young people in this community. But because that just happened this past weekend, I wanted to note the wonderful teamwork on the part of the basketball teams. A couple other things. We had a wonderful Mayor Summer Youth Employment Fair this past Saturday, so thank you to our Parks and Rec Department and to Nathan Norman, who was sort of the point person this year. It was another great fair. We had over 80 employers. We had 84 that had signed up. We had over 500 students that were part of it. Some wonderful opportunities for summer jobs, and I think we all recall how important that is to our youth in growing up. So if you weren't able to make the fair and you're interested, please reach out to the Youth and Young Adult Division here at Evanston, and jobs are still open, and we want to get as many youth as we can employed. Alderman Braithwaite, do you have something to add on that?
I just spoke to the director, and it may make sense to make the announcement because of the games this week, and there was a track meet that we had a large number of individuals who missed that. So I know he's here somewhere, and at some point maybe we make that announcement. If not, I will at Call of the Wards.
We have the Parks and Rec director here, Lawrence Hemingway. So we did definitely recognize that there was a dip in the number of students, in part because several were downstate for the basketball game, as well as at other activities with ETHS. If you just wanted to make a couple remarks.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Clerk Reed, members of council. The last count that I had, and we're doing a final count, probably about 11:45, right before it ended, we were at 575 students. We had over 500 students that had registered for the job fair, but that's not our final number. I know there was still a wave coming in right at the end before we closed the door, so I just don't have that final number. But as Alderman Braithwaite alluded to, there was quite a few other activities that were taking place, so we had a lot of young people who were not able to participate. So there is another job fair that the department is working on, and maybe some of those students will be able to take advantage of that.
Terrific.
Yeah.
Okay.
I thought there was a date scheduled, so that's what I'd shared.
Okay.
Pending.
Yeah, we'll get that out in the newsletter.
Correct.
As well as mentioned at the next council meeting. So thank you, Mr. Hemingway. National Public Health Week is coming up, April 1st to the 7th. We talked about colon cancer at the last meeting. We did a proclamation. I can't stress enough how important it is it is for us to have a healthy community, in body and mind, and we'll have some activities around that week coming up, and Avonda Thomas, our health department director, will be making a few remarks at some point on National Public Health Week. And I also have a proclamation for the Evanston North Shore Bird Club, and I don't know if Jim LaRochelle is here. Jim. All right. If you want to come on up here, I'm going to present this proclamation. This is their 100th anniversary for the Evanston Bird Club, which was started on March 6, 1919. The founders of that organization invited all who had an interest in birds to join them, and they had 50 people at the original charter meeting. And the mission of the club was and continues to this day to be bird education, observation, and conservation, as evidenced by providing monthly expert speakers, sponsoring local region bird walks and trips, and by helping to develop the Clark Street Beach Bird Sanctuary, which, if you haven't been to, is a wonderful bird sanctuary. And they're also doing a lot of other work along the canal and the Ecology Center with another grant that came through. Now, therefore, I, in celebration of this 100 years as mayor of the city of Evanston, do hereby proclaim March 26 as Evanston North Shore Bird Club Day in the city of Evanston. Encourage all residents and businesses to support the Evanston North Shore Bird Club and to protect local and migrating birds, and to promote a bird-friendly environment throughout this entire community. And you guys are all doing a wonderful job, and my honor to offer the We'll get a picture for you, Clark. Sure. Come on. Get all the publicity we can.
There's a bunch of this. Alrighty, 1, 2, 3. Somebody else coming? Okay, let's try it again. Very good.
Thank you again, all. Appreciate you doing this. I'll write that down.
Now, I do have a question for the Bird Club while I have you all here. So years ago, when I bought a property here in Evanston, there were these incredible purple martins that were there, and they used to come here for like 6 weeks every year, and now they haven't come in a long time. So maybe offline we need to talk about that and figure out if I'm doing something. I've scared them all away, or just as a group they've decided to go someplace else. But they were amazing. They were amazing birds, and we have some amazing wildlife here. So thank you for what you do. Lastly, on a on a sad note and disturbing note, I do want to say a couple words about the terrible shooting that happened in Christchurch last week. Ana as Larek Amek Altarzi. On behalf of all Evanstonians, I offer our condolences to our Muslim brothers and sisters. The heinous terrorist attack this past Friday, March 15, that killed 50 and injured 50 more at the El Noor Mosque in the Linwood Islamic Center in Christchurch, New Zealand, is an affront to all decent and humane people on this earth. Nonetheless, this attack, much like others we have seen, the Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church attack in Charleston, South Carolina, the Tree of Life Synagogue shooting in Pittsburgh, the list frankly goes on, is an attack on our differences, our religions, our cultures, our beliefs. Evanston, like so many other communities, has made it clear that hate has absolutely no home here. And let me say that again in Arabic. Al-Kara Hait Lays Laha Menzil Huna. We stand with you because you are our friends, our neighbors, and our fellow human beings. We stand with you because we all know that solidarity is the cornerstone of our diverse democracy, and its presence is a source of unyielding strength. I spoke with one of the leaders of the mosque that we have here in Evanston, which is in the 5th Ward, Alderman Ruth Simmons' ward, on Simpson, and expressed, my condolences on behalf of everybody here in Evanston. There is going to be a interfaith service held at the mosque, and I wanted to let everybody know they're still working out some of the details, but the date will be Sunday, March 31st. It'll be in the late afternoon, and it'll be at the Darsuna Mosque and Community Center, which is on Simpson. So we will put more information on that out. But to all of our Muslim brothers and sisters, we stand with you. With that, we're going to turn it over to the city manager for any announcements.
I have no announcements, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. City clerk, I think something big started today.
Well, it doesn't seem to be that big, but we have a school board election that early voting began today. We had a whopping 35 people come out to early vote. So Evanston, you got to do a little bit better. And tomorrow, the clerk's office will be starting our text campaign. We'll be texting folks who don't traditionally come out. I think we have close to 10,000 people on our list. So hopefully we'll start to see a difference in turnout over the next few days. We also have what I consider a neat art installation downstairs. So please feel free to early vote, take a picture, share it online, and let other folks know that we have a very important school board election for District 65. We'll be electing 3 candidates for District 202, electing 3 candidates, as well as District 535, which there are 14 candidates running, but we'll be choosing 3 of those candidates. And if you live in South Evanston, then you'll be also voting for Ridgeville Park District commissioners. So please come out and early vote between, like I said, March 18th, which is today, until April 1st. The first week you can come until 5 p.m. and early vote. The second week you can come until 7 p.m. We also have weekend hours available, on Saturdays from 9 to 5 and from Sunday to 10 to 4. So please come early vote or cast your ballot on election day or request a mail-in ballot. You can get help with from the clerk's office. I think those are the only announcements. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Clerk Reed. And I can attest, I was one of the 35 today that went in to vote, and it was a breeze. So you've got a couple weeks to do that before the election day on April 2nd. We're going to now move to public comment. As everybody knows, we set aside 45 minutes for public comment. We take the number of people that have signed up, we divide it by 35, and that's what we get. So we have 30 people that have signed up this evening for public comment. So that means we're going to ask everybody to keep your comments to 1:30. And just hit those salient points, and I'll call 3 names at a time. And so if people just get up there, we'll go through our public comment, and then we'll move to the special orders of business. I know there's several items on the agenda tonight that folks are interested in speaking to, and the folks up here are interested in opining on. So we'll go ahead and we'll move to public comment. The first 3 speakers that we have tonight. We're going to start with Marsha Kerr, Carl Klein, and then Michelle Sweeney. And Clerk Reed, just if this is your first time here, Clerk Reed will keep track of the time. And if you hear the alarm go off or the little buzzer on his phone go off, if you can wrap it up in like 10 seconds after that, we'd appreciate it. Welcome.
All right, thank you. It has been over 30 months since the RFP was issued for sale and development of the library parking lot. Tonight, we are hopefully at the long-awaited point of decision on the fate of the proposed office building. In all that time, issues with the project have not changed. Spot zoning to D3 Downtown District is inappropriate and formally opposed by well over the required number of property owners within 500 feet of the site. There has been no credible market feasibility study. There are questions about the development team and property ownership. Contract terms have not been met. There is no tenant parking in the building. 7 variances are being sought. The building juts into the alley onto public land that the developers did not purchase. Public benefits are lacking. The building is too big for the site and is out of scale with the residential neighborhood. Public safety will be at risk. Evanston institutions like the library, Women's Club, WCTU Historic District, and the National Historic Landmark Francis Willard House will be harmed physically and institutionally, and that's putting it mildly with the construction. Neighborhood and downtown businesses and professional service providers will suffer from the loss of accessible surface parking in the short and long term. All these things and more led to the correct and unambiguous recommendations for denial of this plan development by DAPR and by the Plan Commission. These bodies are made up of professionals who did their jobs thoroughly and openly on behalf of the city. Their resounding recommendation for denial of this project must be respected and endorsed. Simply put, this is the wrong site for this development, and we ask you to confidently and without hesitation vote no for this development tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kerr. All right, next speaker is Carl Klein, then Michelle Sweeney, then Melanie Cody.
Good evening. We're currently celebrating Women's History Month. We have a historic number of alderwomen on Evanston City Council. We are represented in the Illinois State Legislature by 5 women. Federally, Evanston is represented by a congresswoman and a female senator. 13 women represent Evanstonians from the local to federal level. This is wonderful and deserves to be highlighted and celebrated. Tonight, however, Evanstonians have to wonder if City Council, which has a supermajority of alderwomen, will honor and respect women's history here in Evanston. Will City Council allow a huge development to loom large over 3 properties on the National Register of Historic Places: the Women's Club, Women's Christian Temperance Union Administration Building, and the Francis Willard House? These buildings are nationally significant for many reasons. Francis Willard has an outstanding historical significance because outstanding historical significance because it is associated with an Evanstonian instrumental in the passage of the 19th Amendment, women's suffrage. It would be a shame to have a huge development cast an eternal shadow over a national historic landmark where we will celebrate the centennial of the 19th Amendment in 2020. The proposed development has many flaws and would have long-term consequences. It would directly and indirectly alter characteristics and would thereby diminish the integrity of the property's location and setting. It would jeopardize the site's very future. The loss of site integrity can lead to a loss of capacity building for historic sites, loss of funding streams, harms to grant eligibility, and the inability to maintain property. Please listen to both DAPR and Plan Commission who have voted no on this development. Please don't make it move forward, and I hope that you preserve the integrity of one of Evanston's most historic blocks. Thank you.
Thank you, Carl. We've got Michelle Sweeney, Melanie Cody, then Austin Scherer.
Hi, I'm Michelle Sweeney. I'm the clubhouse manager at the Women's Club of Evanston. And I'm here in opposition of the parking lot development. This building requires 7 site development allowances in order to make it profitable for the developer. The burden of these 7 allowances will have a profound and lasting impact on the businesses, residents, and employees of the area. The building is too large for the lot. Its footprint is too big. In the 4.5 years that I've been an employee of the Women's Club, I've become familiar with the challenges to safety, both my own and others, while walking and driving on this alley. I have studied the architect's plans. While the renderings are nice, they are not the reality of this alley. In reality, there is not an alley-level sidewalk at McManus. There are trash receptacles and 2 stairways, which drop students directly into the alley. In reality, the Women's Club trash receptacles are on the alley, obscuring sight lines for cars exiting their garage. In reality, cars exiting the garage will have to cheat out onto the alley to get a better view, and will be faced with garage exits from the library, McManus, a proposed stop sign to the north, a proposed stop sign crosswalk to the south, a stairway from McManus, cars, pedestrians, scooters, bikes. In reality, there will be a canyon effect at times in the alley. In reality, the oversized building will adversely affect large vehicle access, including fire department apparatus. I understand the needs to sell the library lot. However, I urge the council not to be swayed by renderings and rhetoric, but the reality that this project is too large and does not work. Please vote no. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. We got Melanie Cody, then Austin Scherer, then Mike Vasilko.
Thank you. I'm the president of the Women's Club of Evanston this year. And I would like to say that over 100 years ago, the Women's Club of Evanston made an investment in this community by listening to its needs. And they built a clubhouse that still stands today where we continue to address the needs of our community. Let me read what was reported in the Evanston Index in November 1910. It was about the Women's Club's investigation into community support for the construction of a clubhouse, and the Evanston Index was the local paper at the time. On all sides was heard the same advice: build something we can be proud of. Consider the future of the town as well as the club. Build on a corner, not on an inside lot. Other clubs desiring the use of a hall, teachers wishing to give musicals or entertainments, young people who wish to use the hall for dances, citizens interested in better things for Evanston and desiring a hall for civic meetings, all urged the club to a greater effort. The Women's Club asked the community for their input, and they listened. Now it's time for the City Council to listen to the community. We have given our input. Evanston citizens, DAPR, and the Plan Commission have all analyzed the library parking lot development proposal and found it does not honor the intentions of the RFP and is inconsistent with the needs of the community. Please step back and think about the next 100 years. Build something on the library parking lot that fits in with its historic neighbors and enhances the community. Build something that's right for this very special location. Voting no respects the city's zoning code and the professional judgments of the city's staff and Plan Commission. Voting no respects the citizens of Evanston. Voting no gives the city the opportunity to think about this site and build something we can all be proud of. We ask you to please vote no. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We've got Austin Shearer, Mike Vasilko, then Vicki Burke.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. The citizens of Evanston have rejected the proposal. DAPR and the Plan Commission rejected it. More than 30% of the property owners living within 500 feet have rejected it. If you go forward with it now, it will seem like the democratic-like process that you've set up is sort of a sham, just window dressing with no substance. The proposal lacks appropriate public benefits, and it subjects the city to significant liability risks. As Alderman Nguyen has pointed out, children like to hang out in this alleyway, and students and library patrons use it for shortcuts. All the risks of this building are now a matter of public record. Dropping off building commuters on Chicago Avenue will only add to the bad congestion on the single worst bottleneck on the east side of Evanston. The proposed building will eviscerate the national landmark Francis Willard House and Museum by placing it in almost perpetual winter shadow. The historic trees on the Willard property will die. There's a very good alternative to this building, which is 601 Davis, an 18-story office building that will be easy to rent with on-site parking. It's a viable alternative. I hope you will build that and not allow this. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Austin. We got Mike Vasilko, Vicki Burke, then Dan Coyne.
Mike Vasilko, 2728 Reese Avenue. Just about a year and a half ago, then CFO Marty Lyons said that there would be no bond issuance to pay for the Robert Crown Center. The current city manager and CFO now have us paying as much as $70 million or more in bond principal and interest. Projections of $3 million a year in new property taxes, fees, fines, staff and service cuts each year for about 20 years or more to come. I hope Alderman will follow Alderman Ruth Simmons' lead and schedule ward meetings focused only on the Robert Crown Center cost and debt. Your constituents deserve to know. Some members of the council should be recusing themselves regarding Robert Crown Center. There's the appearance of conflicts of interest with Alderman Wilson involving personal and financial commitments to Beacon Academy. Beacon Academy is trying to structure an arrangement to secure naming rights on the interior of the Robert Crown Center building and on the exterior fields, and the project is within Alderman Wilson's ward. Alderman Wilson should have recused himself some time ago and should recuse himself from any further discussion and any votes regarding Robert Crown Center. Alderman Revelle and Mayor Haggerty have both made substantial monetary contributions to the project. These kinds of financial investments create a conflict of interest for the mayor and for Alderman Revelle. I think both the mayor and Alderman Revelle are honorable public servants, yet in fairness, they should both recuse themselves from discussions and votes regarding Robert Crown Center. The Friends of Robert Crown were supposed to deliver funds to the city before construction started, and they did not. Contrary to the May 21st, 2018 presentation, FOIA responses show no funds of any kind were forwarded by the Friends of Robert Crown to the city in 2017, none in 2018, and so far there have been none in 2019, despite assurances by the city staff and the Friends of Robert Crown. There are no agreements between the city and the Friends of Robert Crown to deliver funds. There are no agreements between the city and the Friends of Robert Crown to negotiate letters of intent with other parties on behalf of Evanston residents, and there are no letters of intent reviewed to date or approved by the City Council or by Evanston residents.
Mike, I need you to wrap it up in like 10 seconds.
Okay. We've made a number of reasonable suggestions. We recommend renegotiate the LOIs, and we expect the Friends of Robert Crown to meet their original donation goal of $17.5 million. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, point of personal privilege.
Okay, sure.
Honorable Mayor, that was an untrue and personal attack on me and my family. Mr. Vasilko had previously threatened to make a similar attack on my family and myself. I have no reason or basis that I would have to be recusing myself from those proceedings.
Okay, thank you.
And Mr. Vasilko was making that threat previously in a phone call. My interpretation was that he was trying to get me to change my voting on this process. So
I hope you have that phone call recorded, because you're the one who called me, number one, and I made no such threat.
All right, I'll let you two talk about this after. We'll move on to the next, and thank you, Mike. We'll move on to the next speaker. We got Vicki Burke, then Dan Coyne, then Bruce Annenbach.
Thank you. Our whole country needs more of this kind of serious, thoughtful, respectful discussions. Those were the words of Sarah Ward, president of the National WCTU, after witnessing the panel discussion this past Thursday that marked the launch of Truth Telling, Frances Willard and Ida B. Wells, a partnership between the Frances Willard Museum, Northwestern, and Loyola University Chicago. We at the museum have been working on this for over 2 years. It did not escape me that I just happened to sit between Michelle Duster, great-granddaughter of Wells, and Sarah Ward, and how significant that in itself was. Neither of them knew who the other was, but at the end of the evening I was able to introduce them to each other and witness a very special exchange of kind words and thank yous. No other women's history site is doing this kind of groundbreaking work around racism in women's movements, opening up their archives to allow for an examination of the truth and encouraging open discussions to hopefully help affect change today. This is happening in Evanston, originating from the property to the north of this proposed development. Can we not look at the parking lot in a more brilliant way to honor and recognize the significance of these two historic properties on either side? Can we not do better for the future of our city? We do not have to accept anything less than exceptional. This is not the right development for the site. It did not pass the rigorous reviews of DAPR and the Plan Commission. They recommended denial. Please listen to the recommendations of these professional and detailed assessments. Please vote no. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Vicki. We've got Dan Coyne, Bruce Annenbach, and then Glenn Madeja.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Mr. City Manager and City Clerk and City Council. Thanks for your service. Dan Coyne, and I think I've already proven the research that I'm from the 9th Ward, which is the coolest, but we'll let that rest. I'm just here to give a friendly, warm, and fuzzy shout-out to the League of Women Voters. They have a forum coming up this Wednesday at the ETHS High School, where voters can get informed about the 4 candidates running for the 3 open seats on our school board at the high school. I think it's imperative that we get more than 35 voters to vote for our children, which is our future, our best investment. And we need to think about the type of people that we would like to bring their skill sets into the boards to help our administrations to educate our future. In District 65, I believe there's 3 candidates running for 3 seats. Great people, but vote, please. And also for our Oakton Community College, I think we have 13 candidates for 3 open seats. So that's a tougher one. But again, the League of Women Voters has a wonderful website and with a lot of resources on there and recommendations. I believe our own Opal has a recommendation for those candidates, as well as the Union of Teachers has a recommendation. And I just ask people to really take a look and find out what the 3 best candidates might be for Oakton Community College. It's a beautiful, equitable post-secondary education that's affordable to people. And also, there's 4 candidates for Ridgeville, so try to take a look at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. All right. Bruce Enenbach, then Glenn Madeja, and then James Engelman.
Good evening. This is in regards to the library lot project. So what do we have here now? We have a couple of small-time real estate investors, a developer with unknown credentials, none of whom were parties to the original and singular responsive bid for this property, and a resolution now to execute an agreement with this entity who has never been approved, nor has the basis to go forward. It is more than understandable that this city has doubts about this developer's intent or ability to build this project. It surely appears to be half-baked. The packet memorandum states that the project is to have foundations in place by June 1st of 2020, but the Third Amendment states that the project is to have commenced foundation work by September of 2020. So which is it? June 1st? September 1st? Foundations in place? Foundations being commenced? Take your pick. Foundations cannot be in place if they have not even been commenced. And having foundations in place does not, by any stretch of the imagination, guarantee that the development will continue to go forward or that the developer might not still bail. Where is our protection? The city's right to revest cannot be allowed to lapse at the issuance of a mere building permit, as outlined in the Third Amendment. This would yield us no protection whatsoever. Appears to be not even half-baked. Given the quite more than understandable doubts coupled with the financial inviability of the project, as well as the rejection by our Plan Commission and unanimous rejection by our DAPR staff, please uphold their good work. Put your trust in your duly appointed, hired professionals that the citizens of Evanston and the council have entrusted. Please reject this proposal. By the way, this building, according to the elevation drawing, is 151.5 feet tall. That's the equivalent of a 14 to 15-story building. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. We got Glenn Madeja, James Engelman, and Brian Whiting.
Enough about this building. Let's talk about me. Okay, come on, a little levity, folks. So 8.5 years ago, I became the volunteer gardener at the Francis Willard House, and using my hard sell skills, I convinced the WCTU to hire me as the full-time executive director for no pay. Now, I'm still doing that, working about 35 to 50 hours a week. And what we've been able to accomplish in that time is we've taken an organization that was formerly the Francis Willard Historical Association with a budget of $8,000 to the Center for Women's History and Leadership with a budget for $117,000. That's still not a lot. That's not a city budget, but it's pretty good. We also raised over $500,000 to invest in the property. Raised and invested $500,000, so we have something to be proud of. That's pretty important. We're not done yet. This September, the WCTU is going to take a vote on giving the property to the Center for Women's History and Leadership. So an Evanston-based nonprofit will then own all of that property in those buildings. We've already started working with the city to take care of any code issues that we might have in that administration building, the 3-story office building in the back. We plan on using that to rent to women's businesses, both established, upstarts, make it a women's entrepreneurial incubator site. What we're doing right now is our mission is to inspire and equip all women to realize their leadership potential through education and empowerment. We're hiring young women into staff positions, intern positions, and tour guides, and we're paying them $15 an hour. Whole Foods got nothing on us, and we're not even owned by Amazon. So, I'm asking you tonight, don't deliver a soul-crushing vote. Just stop this building, and let's figure out how to move forward from here. Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn. We got James Engelman, then Brian Whiting, and then R. Raz Jenkins.
Hello, I'm James Engelman from the 5th Ward, 24 Brown. I would like for you guys to purchase this ice resurface for Robert Brown's ice thing, because I think it'll be very good. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, James. We got Brian Whiting, R. Raz Jenkins, and then Doreen Price.
Thank you, Mayor.
Alderpersons. My name is Brian Whiting. I'm a longtime resident of Lakeshore Historic District here in Evanston. I'm also the president of Telos Group, which is a downtown group which represents over 30 million square feet of office space. So I'm here tonight not necessarily as an advocate either way. I am an advocate of Evanston, though, and over the my last 20 years, I have seen virtually no new office construction in Evanston. I can tell you my professional outlook on it is that Evanston has a well-deserved reputation for being very, very difficult to get an office building built in. Yet it's a market that is very well suited to attract a younger workforce that many companies are looking for today. And the reason this bothers me is because I'm also a taxpayer, and I look at things like this, the amount of debt we have and the arguments we have about services and things that may need to be cut, staff that needs to be cut. And I do know how much office buildings generate in tax revenue. I do know that office users bring a daytime population that uses our restaurants and creates a better environment for the people who come home to Evanston in the evenings and the weekends. I do know they go home and typically don't vote, so they don't have a real say when they spend their tax dollars in the office building. That goes for office owners as well. So although it seems in discussions this project has both its merits and demerits, I would look to everyone to try and find a solution that allows office developers to build additional office space, which I believe was what was originally intended through the RFP for this site, or wanted, and just put together a more cohesive, intuitive process as we go through this so that office buildings can be built in Evanston again. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Brian. R. Raz Jenkins, Doreen Price, and Misty Wittenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and City Council. My name is R. Raz Jenkins, and Raz is a real name. I'm named after my grandfather. I bring you greetings from Des Plaines. So contrary to public opinion, you can't get to Evanston from Des Plaines. I'm a Des Plaines resident and a candidate for the Oakton Community College District 535 Board of Trustees. And along with pretty much everybody else in the world, there are 13 candidates for 3 open seats. So like my friend Dan was saying, I'm here to acknowledge, thank, and remind us of the good work that's being done by the League of Women Voters and the work that they do to get information out about candidates. An informed electorate is key to our democracy, and for information on we 13 Oakton trustee candidates, I invite you all to check out their website, get information about the 13 of us, and make your decisions. Thank you so much for your time, and look forward to this election.
Great. Well, thank you for visiting Evanston. All right, come on back. Doreen Price, Misty Wittenberg, then John Jogger. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing people's names.
I think what we're witnessing right now is what happens when people have time to think about things in the context of what's going on and in the context of goals. And you are speaking on goals, so I will show how these things actually come together into something exciting, just as I think is what you're trying to plan for. In terms of the election, I think it's good that people from all around see that we're one big community, because our successes in each other's communities help build successes in our very own. In terms of the City Council SP5 goals and ordinances, I'd like to see procedures and ordinances updated to be aligned with City Council's equity, affordable housing goals, and hope to see climate change resilience as an important goal as it is. It also means that discussions with developers will be clear, not muddied, if this is brought forward in a document associated with inclusionary housing ordinance. The steering committee is supposed to meet tomorrow, but I don't know how many people know about it because it wasn't on the website. So process there would be greatly appreciated, and I've already mailed information to our communications director, who I've met on the phone, who's an awesome guy. So I hope there's a different way of making sure you reach everybody. The specifics are inclusive goals to prevent predictable increases in our communities, and they're predictable, in our community's economic divide, for which the 2019 ordinances and enforcement are committed to address to optimize livability in scope and substance, and not limited to, this is quick, SOPs, disaster priorities, processes, and procedures. Improve triage, including quickly pumping water out of homes to to avoid mold, especially in vulnerable populations. This is not an expensive fix at all. Remediation, restoration with future-proofing, which is ongoing in terms of weatherizing, but not necessarily fully evolved. Safeguarding vulnerable, affordable homes as stock for preservation. That's a huge topic currently. I encourage people to go to the steering committee and see what they talk about in terms of the importance of us staying in place. Meaningful jobs, including local youth. I have a note attached to this that I'm submitting as public comment, and also the reference that I'm alluding to that is an eye popper. I presented it at the environmental group, and they're very, and Nasser.
I need to wrap up in like 10 seconds.
Okay, and our environmental person wasn't around to read it just yet, but a lot of it good reception, so read it. Meaningful jobs, a more livable community, and community-wide generated ideas from the polar vortex. This is especially timely and important, last sentence, as we ask young 18 to 24 years old to consider many new possible career paths, including hands-on ability to earn a living, helping a community they love and who loves them back one by one. And then the rest of it will be submitted, as well as the reference, and I encourage everyone, counsel everyone, to read it, because when you get the environmental board to tell you that that's awesome, that's an awesome article, it probably is an awesome article. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Doreen. We got Misty Wittenberg, John Yager, Don Flayton, and then Laurie Osborne.
Hi, Misty Wittenberg, 5th Ward. So tonight before you is a funding plan for Crown, and as you consider it, just consider the contingencies that are built into it and what those contingencies would look like for the public if they were equivocal. So for example, the $1 million from Northwestern is contingent upon an annual allotment of 600 exclusive ice rink access hours with 8 slots at no charge, 200 hours of party room use, and 6 categories of recreation activities, equipment included, lessons and social events provided by the city for its students. Proportionately for the public's $90 million, we would then require 54,000 annual hours of exclusive rink access, 720 slots at no charge, 1,800 hours of party room use, and 540 categories of recreation activities and events for our children, equipment included. For its $500,000 in funding, Beacon Academy Private High School stipulates rights to 4 reserved parking spaces, exclusive naming rights to the gym, including, quote, prominent signage declaring the space to be the home of the Beacon Academy Wolves, with its name and logo painted on the gym floor, as well as additional branding and signage on Crown's outdoor fields and scoreboards, which first access to reserve Crown facilities for its students, after which the public is, quote, free to use the unclaimed slots. So then the public would similarly need 720 reserved parking spaces, also 180 logos painted on the gym floor, declaring the space to be the home of the Evanston City taxpayers. We could also, it could be a single logo, 180 times the size of the Beacon logo. We're flexible to working on that. Thank you.
All right, thank you. John, and if you could pronounce your last name, because I've probably been destroying, I apologize. Then we got Don
Mayor
Flayton.
Haggerty, it's not your problem. It happened in Ellis Island about 1907, and I never fixed it. So, my name is John Yeager. Thank you for allowing me to speak here. City council members. I work for the Chicago Regional Council of Carpenters in a role that began about 10 years ago. And during the Great Recession, I was given the dubious task of trying to find real estate financing for projects that were stalled by banks. This project, like an earlier speaker just mentioned a moment ago, office buildings in Evanston. There were certain points in Chicago, many of those projects in the letter I wrote were in Chicago, and we've worried about absorption in Chicago with all the housing projects, the multifamily for rents. Are we going to hit absorption? And I spoke to the real estate investment firms I deal with on the Taft-Hartley side on pension investment for real estate, and they told me at that time, if you can't find more projects in Chicago, they were interested in 2 towns, Evanston and Oak Park. So very shortly afterwards, I received this project that now many people have spoken of this evening. And office buildings in Evanston are of interest to 2 of the 10 10 real estate funds that I deal with. These are not, like an earlier comment I made, some slipshod developers. We're talking about the MEPT, Benzel Kennedy, $8 billion portfolio, Intercontinental Real Estate in Boston, also I think they're about $9 billion. They've seen the beginning renderings and some scaling of that Mr. Steck has brought to our attention thus far. Problem is we can't go further unless there's an approval. So I have an interest based on the things that have been spoken about tonight. I can't make comments of exactly where the property is and the problems that relate to the adjoining property, but I've heard these things before. You go out in rural areas, people are hugging trees. You go in the city and people are buying space over existing buildings because there is no place to build. I work for the Carpenters Union. We're about jobs. We're about progress. We're for good paying jobs.
Need you to wrap it up in 10 seconds, John.
We are obviously in support of this for those reasons. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's be respectful of what everybody has to say up here, right? I appreciate that. We got Don Flayton, Laurie Osborne, and then Mary Rosinski.
Good evening. I'm Don Flayton. I live and own commercial and residential property in the 4th Ward. I've been told that the fact that the project seeks to rent space across the street on Church, over 200 parking spots, rather than to provide for its own parking as required by applicable zoning, is not a sexy issue to present to the council. That many of you won't care as much about it as other potential issues. But how can a large Class A office project that offers no parking for its tenants be a viable project? How can you approve that? I own office and retail space downtown. I own such a building on Fountain Square that is landmarked and has no parking. I and other owners rely on the city's municipal parking lots to serve our tenants and their clients and guests. As you chip away at parking requirements for new developments, you chip away at the economic viability of properties like mine. And you increase the risk of failure of the core of downtown, which I'm sure that all of you promote as something special, something that makes Evanston special. I'm not asking for special consideration. I am just asking that you apply the rules that are already law. Please vote no.
Thank you, Don. Laurie Osborne, Mary Rosinski, then Sarah Shostak.
My name is Laurie Osborne, and I'm the director of the Evanston Women's History Project in the Frances Willard House Museum. And I want to pose a series of questions for you that I hope you will consider regarding the library parking lot development. On this block of Chicago Avenue, there are remnants of a historic neighborhood of modest homes, once filled with ordinary people who did extraordinary things. Other historic neighborhoods in Evanston, such as this, have been compromised, even sacrificed to development. Do we want this to happen yet again, but this time on our watch? If the parking lot is to be developed, and I'm not opposed to development, is this building right for this site? Is this truly the best use and only building we can imagine? Or might the goal be to enhance and not harm this historic setting? This developer is asking for significant benefits. Is he in turn giving the city and its residents matching benefits? What has he done to deserve this preferential treatment? Why has this now become about how the developer deserves our sympathy for putting up with this process? He stands to gain huge benefits. The process he's gone through is to be expected with such a development and is not exceptional. The current property owners on this block are citizens and taxpayers. Why are we not talking about how much they've endured with this lengthy and complicated process? Finally, there's a simple reason why this has taken so much time. If this was right, it would have been easy, and we would have been done with this long ago. Let's not now act as if we don't have time and choices, because we do. Let's take the time to get this right. Thank you.
Thank you, Laurie. We got Mary Rosinski, then Sarah Shostak, then Joan Sapard. Again, I apologize if I'm mispronouncing.
Hi, Mary Wazinski. I'm here to speak on behalf of the Robert Crown, and my feeling that I think it's really time to stop not moving forward with the project, but to bring forward for the public, the taxpayers, and the residents a clear picture of what we have gotten ourselves into. And I went through every presentation and all those 31 meetings or 23 meetings. Until January 24th, there was no mention of what this was going to cost on an annual basis for the taxpayer. And we've gone from a $30 million project without plans, and we started, and then it got up to the $40 million, then $43 million, then $48 million, and now we're at $56 million. And it wasn't until the January 24th this year that we saw in the presentation packet, this is going to cost taxpayers $1 million, and that wasn't right, because it's really costing taxpayers $1.8 million, but the first 4 years we are not paying any principal. So where we're at right now, as best I can see from the project, is the Friends of Crown are going to be bringing in $5 million toward a $50 million project, which means that we are bonding out close to 40, well, we're set for 43, I think, but we're missing $7 million there. And that $7 million alone is $1.5 million a year in annual debt. So what I'm saying is, one, I really hope you will respect the taxpayers' right to see the MOU before you pass it. It should have been passed years ago. Second of all, we have a right to see all the letters of intent to know we're paying this. This is our house, everyone in Evanston, and you guys are renting it out. We need to know who our co-people are and are they paying fair share. So I'm saying, please get the MOU, put it out with enough time for discussion so all your constituents can weigh in on it, then get the letters of intent with all the stipulations so that everyone knows what's going on. And finally, get the real amount of what it's going to cost these taxpayers, because at this rate we have a minimum of a $3 million debt service. That excludes the $500,000 to $600,000 a year it'll probably cost to run it, which is fine, I get it. But if we don't get that full $15 million from the Friends towards the cost of this, that $3 million debt service should go up to $4 to $4.5 million, and that's for Robert Crown alone. For my tax property, it looks like it'll be a $400 tax increase. So I'm just saying, let's get it out there. I think we can do better. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mary. Sarah Shostak, Joan Safford, and Ray Friedman.
I am here to speak about the library parking lot, not about the building per se, but have you considered the following 4 major questions, given the many shifts since the city accepted a bid in October of 2016? If this project is approved, with whom will Evanston be dealing? Who would be the purchasing entity and the developer? What are their qualifications, and what's the evidence that they would or could deliver this building? What protections are being put into place, and which language is going to govern what is written in the summary in your packet tonight or in the resolution? They are not the same. They differ significantly. These questions arise really because Connor Commercial bowed out back in 2016. Others appeared in their place and were allowed to take their place. They became a more or less consistent face of this project in 2017 and through 2018. That statement masks a number of changes in entity name and among the named principals who've come and gone. But long story short, no one before you now was part of Connor's proposal that you accepted. Now we see those who were the public face of this project are only 9% of the ownership of Chicago Ave Partners, LLC. 89% is held by an entity whose principals have never been part of this process. I urge you to consider carefully and vote no. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Sarah. All right.
Good evening. I'm Joan Safford, 1618 Wesley Avenue, 50-odd years of residence here in Evanston. I wanted to speak first about this very extraordinary program that took place up at Harris 107 about the conflict that arose between Ida B. Wells and Frances Willard over the issue of lynching. And it was a overflow crowd. I was sorry that I saw none of you. I know there's so many other things that you do on Wednesday nights, but it was an overflow crowd filling Harris 107 over into the Richard Leopold room. And it was so important because it was said what was happening at the Frances Willard property and the archives there, that they were seeking the truth in those archives, even when the truth, the racism of Frances Willard, was such a very difficult thing to confront, and her own rationales. So you missed a really good evening. And that makes me think, because I rummage around in old city documents, about the 2009 downtown plan, which was adopted in February of 2009, and which, interestingly, did not contemplate changing this lot to a spot zone of D3. Instead, it contemplated a park, but preserving parking, because those two lots were created to sustain the library. Houses came down, historically significant houses came down to sustain that library. And so here we are with that, and I want to just read to you from the 2009 thing, which is very slow, short.
10 seconds, 10 seconds, because we're over our time. All right.
Over the long term, the site has the potential for a number of activities and amenities due to its proximity to the library, shops, the university, and multifamily housing. These could include a reading garden, a playground, a sculpture garden, garden places, open space for active recreation, intimate gathering spaces with seating. Another option that we should consider is to seek outside the government, or foundation funding for development of a women's themed park at this location to take advantage of the site's proximity to the Women's Club and the Women's Christian Temperance Union. But that there would have to be an allowance for parking directly underground, which was accessible in order to continue to sustain the library. This is something which has never been rejected, even with the revised downtown plan.
Thank you, John. All right, welcome, Ray. We got Ray Friedman, then Tom Rajakovich, and then Evelyn McGowan.
Good evening, Mayor Haggerty, City Council, City Manager, and City Clerk. First, I'd like to thank Mayor Haggerty for his excellent proposal last week on Harley Clark. It makes a lot of sense and sounds like a plan that everyone can live with. I'm very sorry that the same strategy was not used for the expense of Robert Crown. Well, this is our third goals meeting for 2019/20. At the first goals meeting, everyone was asked to assign a number as to which goal they felt most important. 7 out of 10 felt number one goal would be to stabilize our economy and work on a balanced budget, if I remember correctly. Now, at the second goals meeting on Saturday morning, all we heard about was that we need to spend more money on 75 parks, new vehicles, water reclamation district, and more studies. 20 new vehicles on January 28th and 24 more on March 11th. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the city needs to be run like a business. This starts and ends with money. I've heard it said over and over, we have a budget crisis. How can we run this city effectively and efficiently if we have a budget deficit every year? I'm sorry to compare once again, but you say there is no money for Harley Clark, but you're okay to spend $54 million on Robert Crown. Can I first say that I'm okay with any project you decide to move forward with, as long as there's money in the bank to back it up, or at least that project is self-sufficient enough to pay for itself, and of course, residents agree with the project and the expense. That's just good business. The bonds that were issued in July last year was in 4 parts, totaling $85 million, $50 million Robert Crown, $20 million other projects, which would be plenty of money to rebuild Harley Clark several times over.
Ray, I need you to wrap it up in 10 seconds.
Okay. Don't residents have a voice and a choice in how and where our money is spent? I'm sorry, it doesn't sound like good business to us. We need to have a plan, and we need to have a balanced budget without raising taxes and fees. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. Do we have a Tom? Again, sometimes when it's typed in, the names get scrambled. It would look like it was Tom Rajakovic.
But I don't think he's here.
Oh, he's not here? Okay. Evelyn, come on up. And then we've got Kira Kelly and then Laurie Howick.
So I'm here to speak about the library parking lot. Although actually, like the gardener for the Francis Willard House, I really want to talk about myself for a minute. I grew up in California, and I came to Chicago to go to architecture school. And I moved to Evanston because I think it's the best place to live, better than going back to California. And so everybody thinks I'm crazy for that. And I have high standards for buildings and parks in my town, but every day I feel blessed to live here. My life is enriched by being active in the YMCA, the YWCA, First United Methodist Church, and the Women's Club. These organizations and my activity in them feed my soul, and the landscape here feeds my eye, and I care deeply about what we build. There are better locations in town for construction or expansion or renovation of office space, and I don't think this site is suited for success for the project that's been proposed. So please vote no.
Thank you.
And I beat the chimes, didn't I?
You did. You're going to get an award. All right. Thank you for coming out. Then we got Kira Kelly. Is Kira here? Here she comes. And then we've got Laurie Howick is our last speaker today. Okay. All right. Kira, you're going to be our last speaker today then. Thank you, Laurie.
Okay. Thank you very much. There's been a lot of great points made tonight, so I'm going to hone in on the question about, as we talk about the loss of this last and only convenient open-air parking lot in the city, which is also the main public library's parking lot, and again, for an amazing library that you all have increased funding for to provide all kinds of wonderful social services. A serious question I have for City Council, City staff, and Mayor is I wonder, in your planning and your vision of downtown Evanston, is downtown still intended for Evanston residents who don't live downtown or cannot easily walk downtown? Is downtown still for families and children, for seniors, for residents and visitors wanting to do errands or shop? Or is it only for a new community of those who live in the high rises and can walk downtown? I ask that because while in a perfect world, I think we would all like to walk and bike and take public transportation from a faraway stop from our home. But the reality is we live in a harsh winter climate, as we've just seen. 5 to 6 months out of the year, we have families with a number of kids. Usually we're pulled in many directions. We need to be efficient if we can. And walking, riding, public transport is just not possible. I explained last week about the challenges of small kids. Anyway, I understand the concept about building densely and encouraging no cars, but we're a suburb with a different makeup than Chicago. And in fact, new families come here and are thrilled with the convenience of Evanston with their young children. The plans you make should be for your current stakeholders as well as for the future. It is us, residents. While we have lots of high-rises and lots of high-rise parking lots, this is really the only convenient parking lot left where a person can jump out, run a quick errand, go to dinner, maybe go to Celtic Knot, go to an appointment without an extra 10 minutes of parking on a garage and ending up on the 6th floor. So anyway, please keep that in mind, that we want to keep Evanston convenient and accessible to families and seniors, and this is one of the last lots where that's possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Kira. All right. Thank you, everybody, for coming out for public comment and sharing lots of different perspectives. We're now going to move to the special orders of business tonight. We have several items on the agenda. This is a special meeting, as we typically don't have a meeting on the third Thursday. The first item of business is SP1. It's the Robert Crown Community Center Ice Complex and Library Project update. So, obviously, there have been lots of questions for a while about the Robert Crown project, so tonight's an opportunity for the council to hear from the staff and ask questions of the staff. So welcome, Ms. Storley.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council, Clerk Reed, and City Manager Bobkowitz. My name is Erica Storley. I'm the Assistant City Manager. I'm going to give a brief update tonight on the progress of the Robert Crown project. As you all know, we broke ground last summer. We anticipate that the building will open at the end of this year. We're hoping that by spring we'll have the demolition of the existing building completed, and then the turf fields would open by July 4th of 2020. So far we are on budget and on schedule, so those are good things. As you can see on the picture, September we started laying the ground, trying to reinforce the poor soils that we reported on previously. In January the steel beams started going up. This is a picture from last week. Much of the structure's exterior has been completed. I have a time-lapse video from the inception of the project to present. It's only about 30 seconds. This is the view is from looking south from I think it's Lee Street, and then at the very end it'll switch to looking east.
Quick.
Less quick. So the new Robert Crown Center is roughly twice the amount of square footage as the existing Robert Crown Center. So we're going to be able to accommodate all existing programming and also expand for future programming. I've compiled this list with Director of Parks and Recreation Lawrence Hemingway. These two slides show all of the existing programming in white and all of the expanded programming in blue. The new facility has many amenities, a dedicated dance room, art room, new culinary kitchen, all kinds of different new spaces that we're going to be able to program with exciting new programs that all the community will be able to enjoy. We've talked a lot about the projections for how the center will operate. As you know, Parks and Recreation is a community amenity, and we try to offer Parks and Recreation programming for all residents to enjoy at a reasonable cost. Now, that said, Parks and Rec is not a profit center. We run the center at a loss. We run all of our community centers at a loss. But when we open the new center, we project based on the new revenues that we'll be able to achieve by programming both ice rinks and the gym. We'll be able to run the center at a less deficit than we're currently operating at, and that is with putting $200,000 a year into the maintenance fund to help cover the maintenance expenses for the center down the road. Sure. Currently, we have about $1.1 million in revenues a year and about $1.2 million in, this is just for ice, $1.2 million in ice expenses. The community center program brings about $500,000, but it costs about $900,000. It's a 2-to-1 ratio. That's the preschool program, summer camps, after-school programs, all of those programs. So each year we're losing about $500,000 a year. Like I said, I don't call it a loss, but that's our operating deficit. Moving forward, next year we project that operating deficit would be $394,000 a year, while we're also putting $200,000 into the maintenance fund. We're projecting a 5% increase in revenues each year with a 2% approximately increase in expenses. So you can see the operating deficit goes to 440 in 2021 and then to 433 in 2023. This is the most recent version of the operating plan. You've seen a couple versions of this as we try to nail down the projections of when pledge redemptions will happen and how we will receive the money from the Friends of Robert Crown Center. So working with them and our in-house finance team, we've just, been able to further refine the bond schedule. So when we come to you on April 8th for the introduction of the second series of bonds, we originally anticipated that bonding to be $16.5 million. We've reduced that down to $15.5 million by getting an extra $1 million from the Friends of Robert Crown in early next year. So that's going to save us about $850,000 of projected interest that we had originally anticipated. We've also got the transfer of cash from the parking fund going in next year. And then you can see down at the bottom, $53.3 million is where we're at overall on the cost of the project. This includes all of our projected debt. We don't yet know what our interest rate's going to be on the second issue of the bonds, but we have an idea based on last year's interest costs. We bonded out for more of the project last year because we wanted to get a better rate. We knew the interest rates potentially were going up this year, so we bonded for the $25 million last year, leaving $15 million to bond for this year. Like I said earlier, we originally had anticipated putting $5 million of Friends of Crown cash towards the project, but now we've increased that to $6 million, so we've decreased the amount of money from the Friends going towards the bonds at $9 million, leaving the total total dollar amount going from the city taxpayers to the $60 million, $59.6. We've been working with the Friends to do some messaging with their donors to try to consider redeeming pledges early. Every pledge that gets redeemed early that's converted to cash that we can put towards a project without having to bond for it, every dollar will save the city about 60 cents in interest. So they've been working with their donors to try to redeem some of those pledges early so we can put that cash directly towards a project instead of having to borrow that money in the future. So next steps, I'm going to come back to you next month, and we will have the MOU with the Friends of Robert Crown on the agenda for approval. We'll also have the first batch of the user agreements for usage of the facility by the private organizations who are going to be putting forth agreements where they're going to be paying for the usage of the facility in addition to any naming rights or anything like that. We're working with many different organizations who have different entities associated with them, so it's taking some time. Everybody's got a board that they need to have their agreements approved by. They've got, there's lawyers involved. These are long-term agreements guaranteeing us a stable funding source or revenue for many years to come. So we've been taking our time trying to make sure that all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed. So we'll have the first batch of those for April, and then I think the remaining ones will come through somewhere around June. Like I said earlier, next month we'll receive the first $5 million in funding from Friends of Crown, and then we anticipate receiving that second $1 million in February of 2020. In June of this year, after the bonds are approved, we anticipate selling those bonds and receiving the funding for the project, so there will be no further bonding for the project after June. And here's some links about how you can stay updated on the project, and links to where there's the webcam that you can see some of the footage that I'd shown earlier. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. So I know you're going to bring the letters of intent. Could you go to that prior screen, because I think you noted some. To us, so just so we have a sense, because again, I know the public has said, hey, we want an opportunity to look at these agreements, which I totally agree with. I think everybody up here would agree with. This is a public process. Are those agreements, can you just discuss how they have come to be? So ultimately, when they come to the council on April 8th and the public sees them in the packet, how they were developed, who put those together?
Sure. So the Friends of Robert Crown has been working with city staff for the past several years to develop these letters of intent with interested entities. Many times when these letters of intent were being developed, this was before a project was even approved. So people were having to donate funds or dedicate funds or pledge funds for a project that may or may not ever come to fruition. So a lot of these pledges were dependent on us building 2 rinks of ice or a full-size gymnasium or whatever it may be. But these letters of intent were developed, and then now my task has been to convert these letters of intent into actual legally enforceable contracts that the City of Evanston will approve so that they can be used for the next 5 to 10 years. Most of them have a 3 to 5 year term. There's only one that's a 10-year term. That's with an ICE user so that we can guarantee that revenue stream for the next decade. There's been a lot of talk about, will there be enough capacity of ice for the community? Every week with 2 rinks of ice, there's 250 hours of available ice, 125 hours on each rink. Northwestern uses the ice 3 hours a week from September until February, and they have 11 games that run on 5 weekends, so at the most, their usage is about 8 hours a week, 5 times a year, and the other half of the year, it's 3 hours a week. So there's 250 hours a week available ice time, and 3 to 8 hours of that will be used by Northwestern 6 months out of the year. Plenty of available ice time overall. This is the stuff that we're negotiating right now with all of the entities. When people were developing these letters of intent, it was for some future use that may not yet be known. So they're not concrete numbers. They were, here's what we generally think we might need 3 years from now. So my task is to negotiate on behalf of the city the best investment that we can get, the best deal that we can get, and basically negotiate for the most amount of revenue that we can get while making sure that the center is available for use by all entities and all community members.
Ultimately, it's the city's signature that's going on this agreement, and then the counter signature is whoever the entity is. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. I just want to say I appreciate that you guys are working hard on these agreements and being really thoughtful about these agreements, because this is a lot of ice time. Okay, you got 2 full sheets of ice, and the fact that you're trying to enter into agreements that have long-term commitments to generate revenue on that, the same with the gymnasium, is really, really important to the long-term viability of the center. So I appreciate that. Alderman Fleming.
Yeah, I have a question. Can you explain how because I think we talked about them simultaneously. We had the consultant who was the fundraising consultant who was consulting for fundraising, and then we had Friends of Robert Crown. So can you explain how we, went from the fundraising consultant and kind of what his role was to how we arrived at the Friends of Robert Crown? And also, I know the MOU is coming back later, but can you explain why we didn't have an MOU before Friends of Robert Crown went out and had conversations?
So, as you remember, Marty Lyons was the lead on this project before now, so I was only put on the project 12 months ago. I've been vigorously bringing myself up to speed on the project, but my understanding is that the City Council funded the fundraising consultant to work in conjunction with the Friends of Robert Crown to raise money specifically for the Robert Crown Center. The Friends of Robert Crown has bylaws. They're a 501c3 organization. Their bylaws state that money raised can only be used to fundraise or to put money directly towards the Robert Crown Center. Can't be used for anything else. So there's been a lot of talk about what's the mechanism that the city granted the Friends of Robert Crown to negotiate letters of intent or to fundraise. The City Council's decision was to hire this consultant to work in conjunction with the Friends of Robert Crown, and that was the mechanism or the vehicle with which all pledges and donations would be arrived upon. So there was no, the formal MOU that we're working on to bring forward on April 8th is going to basically outline how the money transfers to the city, at what intervals, et cetera, and what the money will be going for. Right now it says $6 million for construction, $9 million for bonds, repayment, but that's pretty much it. We anticipate that we will post the MOU online probably next week, so everybody will have a couple weeks to look at it before it comes to council on the 8th. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and I have another clarifying question, which you might not be able to answer because Marty's not here. But the Friends of Robert Crown, was this, I know it's an organization now, but was it a group, I'm assuming it's a group of citizens, and it was open to anyone in the city to volunteer with. There's no paid staff. This is just a group of citizens who are committed to fundraising for whatever interest they have in Robert Crown.
That's correct. There are many entities that fundraise on behalf of the city with which the city has no formal arrangement. There's Levy Center Foundation, there's Parks Foundation, there's many entities that raise money for the city, and we don't have these formal agreements in place, implicating how money gets transferred. People just raise money and then they give the money to the city.
City Manager?
And Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I really want to add to that last point that Mr. Early made. We have many organizations that raise money on our behalf. The Levy Senior Center Foundation, I met with their leadership last week about work that they're doing, raising money for improvements in rooms, and they are very hands-on. They are working with the city, looking for vendors. They are looking at bids. They're very hands-on. We have no MOU for this way we operate with the Levy Senior Center Foundation. The Evanston Environmental Association has raised money for so many improvements at the Ecology Center over time. They have picked projects. They have raised money for the project based on engineers' estimates of the city. We have no MOU with them. The Police and Fire Foundation, created a few years back, they raised money for equipment needs of the police department, the fire department. They then purchased those equipment needs. We have no MOU with them. So I think the MOU that you're going to see with Robert Crown is really a blueprint. I think some people are saying, why is it taking so long? I guess my view is, thank goodness we're going to have it, because we could use it now with all these other organizations. I think we set expectations with volunteers who dedicate their time. Let me go back to the Levy Senior Center Foundation. There are a group of individuals who every single day are tirelessly working to make that be the best facility it can be. But we also have them sitting next to city staff, picking out shades of carpet. I don't know if that necessarily was ever the vision of the city council in working with the Levy Senior Center Foundation. An MOU with them, I think, will be very helpful. An MOU with the Environmental Association, with the Police and Fire Foundation, with the Parks Foundation, all groups that we've had for a very long time. So I would hope that as we look at this MOU, we don't wonder where has it been. I think we say, thank goodness we now have a template that's going to make our working with other organizations that support city causes that much more strong.
But so my question was clarifying, and I just, for the record, since people were talking about this issue, the Friends of Robert Crown no one is paid, right? These are all volunteers. Is that correct?
Correct.
And this is an open organization, so if, whoever were interested in joining the Friends of Robert Crown, I imagine there's a way they can contact people and participate in this fundraising.
That's correct. The Friends Board is always looking for interested volunteers to help fundraise. We would hope that the Friends of Robert Crown would want to continue fundraising in perpetuity. That's what their intention is. And if they did, that would be fantastic, because we anticipate there would continue to be things that we could use fundraising dollars for even after the center is built and paid for 25, 30 years from now.
Right, and I just wanted to state that because some people have made comments in terms of it kind of being a private club and we don't know who these people are, so I just want to be clear that these are not paid staff. I objected to the paid consultant, but that if other people would like to fundraise or participate in any other way, that this group of people, and I only know I think 2 of them, would be open to have that happen.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you, Alderman Fleming, for those questions. I mean, I know that over 1,000 people in the community have contributed to this campaign where they've raised over $12 million. So it's pretty impressive what a group of people here in Evanston can do when they all come together and have a strong mission and something that they're trying to accomplish. On those lines, in terms of the people that contributed, I know there was a speaker tonight who raised the issue of, do conflicts of interest exist if aldermen or myself have supported things, and I know lots of us up here support lots of things around the city, whether it's with our time or with our money. Just for the record, my wife and I did make a decision to support this project in the capital campaign for it. There is not a separate agreement that says we're getting something in return. We just, like many of the people that did this, think it's a great opportunity for the community. I don't believe that that's a conflict of interest, and I just wanted to put that out there because that is something I've heard before this evening on that matter, and I do think it's a slippery slope if we start to say, okay, anything that the people up here are involved in or that they support with their philanthropy dollars, creates a conflict, and I got all sorts of conflicts, and I think other people up here do around town. Alderman Braithwaite.
Yeah, I guess I'd like to take some personal privilege because, as you know, Mike, there is a different fund, a different cause every single week here in this town. And I'll be honest with you, our town, if our city staff or if our city taxpayer dollars paid for every single service that we have in our town, we would be closed. And so it's almost a slap in the face of our non-for-profits, and it's a shame. I don't think you have to say anything. And I look across this dais, and I see you all every single weekend, 2 or 3 times a month at various events, spending our own money to support these wonderful organizations. So to the mayor, Alderman Royal, we all contribute across the board. It's really unfortunate that this one is being called out. So I would be remiss if I sat quiet on that issue. And I think it's important for the public to know. I don't mind you all disagreeing with any issue, but when it gets that granular and personal, I got to call it out. And so I am. And thank you all for the time that you give, obviously. It's thankless, as well the support that we provide citywide, including your time, which is sometimes more valuable than the dollars that we provide on a regular basis. So I just have to say that. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Braithwaite. Alderman Rainey?
Well, and I think we've all been encouraged to get our constituents and friends to help support funding Robert Crown, to buy a brick, to do this, to do that. However, at least one of us was sent to the Ethics Committee when we tried to raise funds on another city issue, and that was Harley Clark. I was before the Ethics Committee because I sent a $100 check to the city of Evanston to support the demolition of Harley Clark, which was an item on the city council agenda that was supported by a majority of members of this council. And nobody on this council called out that issue. Not one person on this council called it out. So
thank you.
That was $100. Yeah.
All right.
And you cannot deny there's not a similarity here. Right?
Right.
So hopefully Alderman Wilson will make certain that never happens to another alderman on this council with his chairmanship of the subcommittee on ethics.
All right. All right. Anything else on this topic of Harley Clark? We have anything else? City manager? Excuse me.
Thank you. I appreciate that because it is so similar. You cannot divide it.
Right.
You cannot divide it.
City manager, Bob Quitz?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'm going to ask the Corporation Council just to spend a moment. Another important issue that's been raised on this topic over the last week or so has been the bonding itself. And Ms. Mason-Cup, I know we've had communications from our bond counsel. If you could just summarize the types of bonds these were and that they were issued pursuant to appropriate law.
Sure. Happy to do that. Good evening, Michelle Mason-Cup, City Attorney. Contrary to the public allegations, I just wanted to set forth that the city followed the notice procedure that's outlined for 501c3 bonds. The city held what's called a TEFR hearing. It's required by the IRS, and it was properly noticed. It was held pursuant to federal tax law, The allegation references that the city's failure to notice the public hearing didn't meet requirements of what are called BINA, but since the city is a federal or is a home rule unit, BINA isn't applicable. So BINA stands for basically a bonding notice act that's a state law, and that isn't applicable. The city is a home rule unit. We are completely allowed to have this authority. That would be applicable if it was like a park district or school district. So the issues are getting combined, but I just wanted to reassure the council that we did follow the TEFR procedures as required by tax law.
Great. Thank you for that clarification. We all appreciate that. All right. Seeing no further discussion about the Robert Crown Community Center, thank you for the update, city staff, on that matter. Is there anything? It says for action, but was that really just for discussion and discussion?
Move that we receive and file the report.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, report is received and filed. We're going to move on now to SP2. Alderman Rainey, would you mind introducing SP2?
I trust this is going to last until we open up our 2 new ice rinks.
SB2, I move approval of a purchase of one ice resurfacer for ice rink operations at the Robert Crown Center from Frank J. Zamboni and Company in the amount of $143,425.50. Move approval.
Is there any discussion? Seeing no lights, City Clerk, could you take the roll, please, on SB2?
Alderman Ravel.
Aye.
Alderman Rainey.
Aye.
Alderman Fleming. Alderman Fisk. Alderman Braithwaite. Alderman Nguyen. Alderman Wilson.
Aye.
Alderman Ruth Simmons.
Aye.
Alderman Sufferman.
Okay, on a 9-0 vote, SP2, the purchase of one ice resurfacer, passes the Evanston City Council. Okay, we're going to move to SP3. Alderman Fisk, could you introduce that one, please?
Sure. It's Ordinance 4-0-19, the map amendment and plan development for 1714 to 1720 Chicago Avenue. The Plan Commission and staff recommend denial of Ordinance 4019 for approval of a map amendment from the R6 General Residential to the D3 Downtown Core Development District in a plan development for a 13-story office building with 112 on-site parking spaces. Passage of the map amendment shall require a favorable vote of 3/4 of all the aldermen per city code. Because a petition signed and acknowledged by 30% of owners of property within 500 feet of the subject property was submitted to the city. Revised plans include approval to construct a new 11-story, 110-foot, 8-inch tall office building, excluding 32 feet 6 inches of parking levels, consisting of approximately 130,000 gross square feet of office space with 76 parking spaces, and it is for action.
Is there a second? Okay. All right. This item's going to be open for discussion. I did want to give the opportunity to Donna Pugh, who's with the development group, just to say a couple words here to the council, and also let us all know that as the discussion goes on, there's folks to ask questions of this evening. So welcome, Ms. Pugh.
Thank you very much. Donna Pugh with Foley and Lardner in Chicago on behalf of Chicago Avenue Partners, which is the contract purchaser, of course. I wanted to let you know who's here from the development team: Greg Steck, who you know, Paul Janicki, project architect, Dennis Vovos from Halliburton Root, Patrick Sabinski from McShane Construction, and Steve Corcoran from Erickson Engineering, the traffic planner. Because there were a number of questions raised about, or at least from one person, about, you know, the purchaser, we first of all have provided a revised organizational chart, which I know is part of the packet. So if there's any questions about that, we have people here who can answer that. In addition, we've provided a number of testimonial letters, which are in the packet or were provided, and including letters from SunTrust Bank, Applegate Thorne Thompson, Exodus Construction, the law offices of Sam Banks, Alston Construction, and Emerald Isle Partners. So we hope you'll take recognition of those. Secondly, there were some questions raised about the alley. I know that Paul Janicki, Steve Corcoran, and others are here to address that tonight, if you did want to get into that in more detail. And then the legal issue, there was some concern expressed about a need for additional security in the event the development team doesn't progress forward quickly enough. So there was a suggestion for a right of reverter, which I think is a very reasonable resolution of that concern. A number of purchases that I've been involved in of municipal land involve a similar reverter. And we worked with Corporation Counsel Mason Cup to come up to with satisfactory language that we were both comfortable with, that provides an option to the city, not a requirement. Now, some of these reverters do provide for an automatic reverter, and then some of the ones I've been involved in, the municipalities regretted that because maybe it was a very technical trigger and maybe they were just about to meet the trigger. and it didn't reserve the city the right to say, hey, let's give them another month or something. So there are some standard reverters out there that do provide for automatic reverter. I don't recommend that, and you know, that's not what was put before you, but I did want to acknowledge that is, that this one I think is much better because it preserves the option for the city to pull that trigger or not, and it basically, as you know, the closing is provided to be June of this year, and it gives a year and 3 months for the development team to have the tenant or tenants identified and signed up, to finalize the plans, to put that through the building permit process, and then to get the building permit and start the foundation. So there's a fair amount going on in that year and 3 months, which is why the date of September 1st was selected, which we think is very reasonable for all the tasks that have to occur within that 15-month period. So that's why it was drafted that way. So we believe, you know, that this is a reasonable response to the concern. We're hopeful that the responses that we're making, both in writing and verbally, if you do want to speak more about the alley. And also we did bring pictures of, well, that's not before you right now, but there are also, back to the question of this developer, we have photos that we could show, if you wish, of 4 other projects that are in place. One of them is a longstanding client of mine, the Sisters of the Resurrection. They own Resurrection Hospital and used to own 7 other hospitals. There's been some mergers and things, but I've worked with the sisters for 20-some years. They're very sophisticated, built parking structures, and you know, they're not just some sisters in a convent. They're very, very sophisticated, and they are working with Greg, and they are very, very excited. Sister couldn't be here tonight, but the very, very high recommendation as well to add to the letters that we've provided. So, Mr. Mayor, we are here to answer questions, and most particularly about the alley, if you should wish to do that.
Terrific. Thank you, Ms. Pugh, and thank you, everybody, for being here to help answer any questions as this conversation ensues this evening. So we'll start off with Alderman Fisk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't have any questions right at the moment, but if I do, I will turn my light on again. As all of you know, this is a project in my ward, and I have followed it very closely over the past 3 years. I have been, as I've told you in many cases, been very happy with the response from the development team and their willingness to meet with all of the adjacent property owners, come to ward meetings and other meetings, and be, I found them to be flexible and positive, extraordinarily so. So my compliments to them, and thank you for hanging in with us. So as all of you know, the reason why we voted for the RFP initially was because we had identified the need for an office building in downtown Evanston. Now, downtown Evanston, if you look at the 2004 plan or 1989 plan or the 2009 update of the plan, this particular location is in the downtown core, well within the downtown core. Within the downtown core, there are 28 landmarks. We work very well and sensitively around those landmarks. If 601 Davis Street comes through, they're going to be dealing with the historic university building. So there are important landmarks in our downtown that we ask developers to be sensitive to, and for the most part, they have, and if they don't, we remind them that that's what we expect. This particular site sits between 2 landmarks, and the fortunate thing about this is that the distance between both the WCTU and the Women's Club is significant. So the concerns about damage or other issues should not be an issue at all. Recently we had the development of the Hyatt Hotel that shared a party wall with the landmark Chaumont building on Chicago Avenue, and we addressed any issues there. Building obviously went up right next to retail, and I think the design of it is better than what we ever expected, and certainly they built as of right an 11-story building, and we thank them for that. So when we first started talking about this building in the RFP, we went out and asked for a building roughly of this height, remembering, of course, that the R6 zoning currently on the site calls for 85 feet plus 12 feet, and then if a planned development, you get another several stories of parking, so roughly a 13-story building. The building that's proposed, the office building that's proposed, is lower than that. The other thing that we asked for, not only going through the process in my ward of meeting with everyone a jillion times, but we asked for no ground floor retail or commercial in order to keep the quiet dignity, if you will, of that particular block on Chicago Avenue. The developer agreed to that, and I thank him for that. We also asked for all 74 parking spaces in the parking lot to be delivered back on site. We had difficulty with that. Putting more parking would have raised the building. The height was an issue. Coming back to 11 stories was certainly at the request of the alderman, and that happened. So all the parking's on site. The building is roughly is 11 stories, and it's roughly conforming with the RFP that we all voted to accept previously. Now, one of the things that I'm going to suggest that we do tonight, and I will make a motion to this effect, but what I'm going to suggest that we do tonight is separate out the vote on the map amendment, rezoning this to D3, and the passage of the building itself. And I'm going to tell you why I want to do that. It's clear to me that the current use of the Women's Club building, which is a membership organization, which is a permitted use under the R6 zoning, that's one part of the building. The other part of the Women's Club is what's defined in our zoning ordinance as a banquet hall. It's basically for an event space. It's how the Women's Club raises money to do their charitable work, and for that we thank them very much. We're very respectful of the Women's Club and preserving their ability to carry out their mission. However, that is not consistent with R6 zoning. That doesn't conform to R6 zoning. The WCTU, on the other hand, as you heard Mr. Medea talk about tonight, and the money that they've received in their new business plan for that particular site, will involve a number of special events, which they already conduct on their site, but also looking at, according to him, renting out space in the administration building. The administration was building as part of the WCTU campus, I think back in 1910. It's an office building. There's an office building in the backyard. I mean, the difference between should there be an office use or not an office use on the site next door, it seems to me to be absolutely clear that office use on the site is appropriate. So what I've seen, and I would ask staff to confirm this because I'm basing this on my own personal reading of the zoning ordinance, but my personal reading says that what is currently being used on the adjacent sites to this particular parking lot are not conforming to R6 zoning, but they are conforming to D3 zoning. So we can have a choice up here with, if we decide not to vote for D3 zoning, we can change the zoning ordinance so that maybe their event uses, their non-R6 uses then become permitted. But that's pretty complicated. So my own personal recommendation is that we look at zoning these three parcels, the WCTU parcel, the library lot parcel, and the Women's Club parcel, all as D3 to make them conform with zoning. The other thing that I will tell you is that the library parking lot obviously is currently zoned R6. That's why we're here. Impervious surface, the limit of impervious surface any surface parking lot under R6 is 65%. We're far exceeding that. So even the city of Evanston isn't conforming to zoning on the library lot as it stands now. So we need to address that as well. But I think that is the reason that I am feeling uncomfortable with rezoning the site D3 right now without really looking and bringing in the other properties that should obviously are being run as D3 uses in an R6 zone. So that would be my recommendation to council. So I'm going to make that motion that we separate that out and take two separate votes tonight, one on D3 zoning and the other one on the library, the building that's being proposed.
Do you need a second?
I do need a second.
Second.
Pardon me?
No,
we can't do that.
Can I interrupt? First of all, this wasn't noticed. The ordinance is in the city packet as a map amendment with the plan development. The zoning analysis is conducted with the map amendment, and all of the calculations are based on that. Part of your proposal, as I understand, is you want to also consider rezoning two surrounding parcels, and that also has not been reviewed or by staff. It's a pretty significant change. Or requested by the property owners, but at the very least, city staff has not done that analysis, and it is not before you. So I would have a strong objection to separating out a map amendment and the plan development.
Okay, I hear you. Alderman Nguyen, if I can finish here, please. I hear what you're saying, and so my recommendation is that I will make a referral to the Plan Commission or P&D to review the current use of these two properties and bring them in conformance with zoning.
Isn't that zoning board of appeals, not Plan Commission?
So
We'll make sure it gets to the right board if this goes forward.
Just so I understand what you're saying, so you want the council to take a vote with an understanding that the surrounding properties will also be reviewed?
No.
Or the whole process would stop now?
We can leave it exactly the way it is with rezoning the library parking lot proposal to D3, but then my referral would be for the two adjacent properties then to be referred to P&D for zoning review.
The referral is up to the city council, but that's a lot of conditions, and
I'm not making that a condition of the vote tonight.
But it sounds like you are if you're bringing it in as part of the discussion.
I'm discussing.
Just a point of information. I think we've covered the issue of referrals with our city manager. It's a referral. And so the referral is made to staff. It's not up for vote this evening, and our staff will come back with the information to keep us
I want to
moving.
be clear, when you're voting on the map amendment, that it is you're basing your vote on the current zoning, not on this zoning that is proposed to go back.
Right.
Please disregard the fact that this is being referred in the sense that you are voting on this zoning.
Right, and my points, if appropriate, and you can tell me if they're not appropriate, but my points are that the adjacent properties are currently being used in a way that is inconsistent with our R6 zoning. That's my point as well. That's not appropriate to say that?
Well, it's certainly not something that I can weigh in on. I'm not a zoning administrator.
Yeah, that's and that's fine, and I respect what you've said. And we will then vote tonight as you've directed. But I do think it's important for us to remember that this is, I was not on the council when this property was back in 1993, when it was zoned R6. I was not on the council when the 2009 plan was passed by the council at that time. I do not understand why the property was zoned R6 when it was not being used as R6. That's my question. So, and that's fine if it's not part of the discussion tonight. Yeah, that's
Okay, so that motion then is withdrawn.
I will withdraw. Yes, I will withdraw
All
that
right,
motion.
so we're back to the conversation. City manager, I know I'm going to go to Alderman Nguyen next, but do you want to ask another staff just to clarify a point?
Director of Community Development, Johanna Leonard, is here. Johanna, do you or Melissa want to come up and just clarify?
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and City Council. Melissa Klatz, Zoning Administrator. Just to expand on what Ms. Mason Cup said, I would recommend that you do not vote on a map amendment to a parcel if there is a referral that could change the zoning of surrounding parcels. It needs to be looked at comprehensively. So if that referral is to move forward with the Plan Commission, then I would recommend that you wait on the library parking lot map amendment as well.
What?
Okay,
That doesn't
now-
make any sense.
Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense. I'm sorry.
Okay, but okay, so
I mean, and Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I think it's a question of how the referral is interpreted. Again, as Alderman Braithwaite has said, the council liberally makes referrals to staff. Perhaps to clarify the referral is to staff and not to an appointed land use body to examine the issues. And I think that may be enough of a distinction. I'll ask Ms. Leonard, the director, to come up and see that. Because I think Ms. Klotz, of course, raises an important point, but I think that the council, by making the referral to our planning and zoning staff, is the more appropriate referral. Is that correct?
Sure. We could study the issue of the uses within the R6 district that Alderman Fisk has referenced, and currently, we need to understand the intensity of the uses of if this is to move forward. But I think we can look at how these uses articulate with the R6 zoning and whether or not.
And then at that point, that information could go to the appropriate land use committees for their consideration.
Right. My understanding is the city could be an applicant in a map amendment if we determined it to be moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
So Alderman Fisk, is that I
Yes,
didn't
no,
mean to
that's-
reinterpret what you said, but
Yeah.
I think Ms. Klotz raises an important point, and I don't believe that that's the intent of the council. The intent, and I'm asking you just to confirm this for the record,
Yes.
is more of a study
Yes,
than it is
absolutely.
to put in motion
Yep.
a change.
Yep, absolutely. And thank you, Mr. City Manager, for clarifying that, Johanna, as well. The point that I was really trying to raise and make is that this rezoning the library lot, we've heard some people refer to it as spot zoning, or this is a different use or something like that. It really isn't. This is a downtown use, and there are downtown users that surround this particular site. And we really have done such a good job in the past of working within these issues, especially the ones that deal with landmarks. And I am absolutely committed and have been from the very beginning of working positively with the neighbors on this. Now, when we did in 1993 and the zoning amendments and things like that, we were doing a number of things. We were encouraging economic growth. We were encouraging new development. We were encouraging human scale, a livable environment that keeps businesses in the downtown. So all of this is very important to understand that this building actually does fit in very well on its site. And the last thing I will mention, since I need to do this all together, I was hoping I could do this in pieces, but I have just two very quick slides that I want to show that we have looked at. So one of the things we looked at was the anticipated taxes, and we compared the proposed building with the other with comparable office buildings in the downtown, trying to determine whether or not the estimate on that the developer was making of roughly $1 million in tax revenue generated is accurate or is believable. We found that was the case, and based on 500 Church Street, 1007 Church, 500 Davis and 1007 Church. This would be the breakdown of taxes. So District 65 would get $420,000, 202, 266, City of Evanston 170, Cook County 67, and you can read on down the road. Library would be pulling in $28,000. And this is on an annual basis. I mean, this is one of the reasons why we decided to go out for the RFP in the first place. The other point I wanted to raise, if we could go to the next slide, is what is generated by an office building? What's the difference between an office building and a residential building? So as you can see, the 2012 International Council of Shopping Centers report, the office worker retail spending in a digital age was transposed into the impact of office workers in downtown Evanston. Average weekly spending on all goods and services in close vicinity of the person's office building is 102. Among the expenditures on goods and services, and grocery stores capture the largest spend, so Whole Foods is going to benefit here. And the more ample the retail, restaurant, and service offerings in the vicinity of the office building, the higher the spending by office workers. At roughly 400 employees by $102 a week, that is approximately $2,121,600 a year in spending from the workers in the office building. That does not count the revenue to the city in terms of the parking garage. I think this is, again, go back and think about why we voted for the RFP in the first place. These are all the reasons that inform us to why this is an important and a good idea. So the building itself, and this is the last thing I will say and let my colleagues take over from here, the building itself, when we held the first ward meeting, Connor Construction was there, and everyone in the ward meeting said the building was terrible, the building was ugly. And Connor Construction made the decision that time that they were going to be part of the building team and not necessarily part of the development team. McShane is part of Connor Construction. McShane is, I believe, the parent company of Connor Construction, and we have a representative from them here today. So the message from the community that everything has changed, and this development team has, the core development team has been here from the beginning. They were the ones who stood up at the ward meeting and heard everyone's objections, including my own, of the design of the initial building. Again, to the credit of the development team, they went out and they hired preservation architects. They took very seriously the fact that they had two landmark buildings in proximity. They went out and hired preservation architects and have come up with a beautiful building. This building is going to enhance the streetscape, has a wonderful frontage that is respectful of the surrounding properties. It is a lovely building, and I'm sure it's something that we're going to be very proud of going forward. So I would just encourage all of you to vote yes on this building. It is incredibly important for the city of Evanston. It is within the downtown core. It is what we've been asking for a long time, and we have it here, and we shouldn't let this go. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Alderman Fisk. Alderman Nguyen. And then we have Alderman
Thank you,
Wilson.
Mr. Mayor. I have a number of points I wanted to make. First and foremost, my positive vote on that RFP is one of the a number of votes that I most regret that I have ever cast on this council. I believed that we could possibly have an office building, but when we only had one respondent, Connor Construction, and the building that they did come in with was stunningly ugly, I changed my mind, because the legitimate, very good developers who had approached us for a couple of years saying, what are you going to do with that library parking lot, had bowed out. And I had conversations with two of them who said, it does not work out. Melissa, it does not work out. We looked at it, and you can't build a building there. And I believed them. And so I voted no to go forward with Connor Construction. Two of us voted no, as a matter of fact. Alderman Rainey and I voted no, because we saw the fact that we only had one respondent, and that response was so awful that this was not worth it. It just was not worth it. So I have continued to be watch this development very carefully, but it has continued to demonstrate that it can't fit on this lot. It just cannot fit on this lot. That those other very legitimate developers who built excellent buildings here in Evanston and have worked with the city throughout and presented superb credentials through every step of the way, not at the last minute, were right. It doesn't work. I am voting no on this, and I would urge my other colleagues to vote no because of public safety in that alley. Our own city engineer has said that the alley will be compromised. We're putting a stop sign. They're putting a sharp turn. They're actually asking for a slice of our alley that we never said was part of the deal. They're also asking us to cut back on a portion of the library parking lot in order to make this building work. This is the one alley, and I've said it before, in all of our downtown where you are likely to find people with mobility problems, seniors, and parents with small children. Not to mention all of the Northwestern students who walk down that alley night and day, all dressed in black, and are really unaware of the risk that they're facing. Why would we take a well-functioning, multi-purpose alley, because that's what it is, and compromise it? Why would we ever do that? That's just sheer foolishness. So that's number one. The second thing is the building is too big for the site. A 5-foot setback from the north and south property lines, that's absurd, especially next to two landmark buildings. This is just demonstration that a building can't be built there. That's not sufficient. It won't protect these two prized landmarks that we have. Carl Klein, thank you very much for the really, really salient point that you made about the number of women we have here on this council and the number of women who represent us, and the fact that we would tonight vote on something that actually harms two of the institutions that have been here for over 100 years in Evanston, that were run and supported and continue to be by women. That's a very important point. There isn't enough parking to support this building. In the building, who builds an office building without tenant parking? We're not there yet. Maybe 20 years from now. And on top of that, we're about to have a building, a 19-story building built in our downtown with parking that will provide plenty of new office space. The public benefits, as a number of people have said, are completely insufficient for so many reasons. The negative impact on these three landmark buildings and on our library is just too high a price to pay. What's not shown in that chart is what is the negative impact on all of the restaurants on Church Street, all of the other buildings that people go to, the retail that people go to because they shop in that open parking lot. That's not there. What also is not there is all the revenue that we get from the parking. There, studies show that women don't like to park in parking structures. The entire time I've been on the Transportation and Parking Committee, we have been very aware of that. That's why if you go into our Maple Avenue garage and our Sherman Avenue garage, you can practically perform surgery in our Maple Avenue garage. We designed it to be light and bright. We painted it. We made the ceilings higher. We made it more open because it would feel safer and more comfortable for women. Here we are putting women, who are mostly library users during the day, into a 7-story parking structure with compact parking spaces, which the city ordinance doesn't permit. I mean, the reasons just go on and on. This is just not worth the price. We can do better. And yes, that 2009 plan, I remember that. It did call for a public park and a potential underground parking there. I think that's a marvelous idea. They do it in Europe all the time. It's kind of pie in the sky, but we have to think that way. We will get office development in downtown. We don't need to have it here and to compromise our library, which is on the cutting edge of so many libraries in the United States. Our library over the last 10 years is remarkable. I'm looking at our library director. When I go to National League of Cities conferences and go to the workshops on libraries, we're doing the 10 things that they're suggest that maybe cities try 1 or 2 of. We've already done all 10 of them. And we're already forging ahead to do so many other things. Why would we compromise the parking and the usage of this library? Why would we compromise the restaurants like Celtic Knot that have been there and held that space while other restaurants have turned over and turned over? But Celtic Knot is still there. But they rely on that parking lot. I just don't believe that this building justifies a positive vote. We can do better. We absolutely can do better. And I'd like to make one final point. This is our downtown. Our library is in our downtown. That's our main library. It's for everybody. The Women's Club is for everybody in Evanston. The Women's Historic Society is for everybody in Evanston. We don't vote. This is not, yes, it's in a ward, but we all use this. We all use this. And in all of the projects that I have ever voted on our downtown, we have viewed this as for all of Evanstonians, not for one particular ward. It's for all of us. When we voted on the movie theater, the 2nd and 4th Ward aldermen, they did not insist that it was their wards. I actually didn't realize it was in the 2nd and the 4th Ward for the longest time, because it was so central to all of us in Evanston. Our public library is central to all of us in Evanston. This parking lot is central to the function of our public library and our downtown. So for all of these reasons, this building is not worth the negative price that we will pay. So I urge all of my colleagues to vote no, and we can do better, as everyone has said. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Nguyen. All right. I would ask folks in the audience to refrain from clapping for one side or the other. You're going to have lots of different opinions up here. Alderman Wilson.
Thank you. My first thing I just wanted to get was a clarification. Is there a contract with McShane for the construction of the work? Yeah, or whoever.
Right now, I met with Jim McShane last week, and 2.5 years ago when they bowed out they wanted to stay in as the construction. So it's theirs to lose. It's subject to bid, but right now there's no formal contract.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. I voted for the original project, so I didn't think the building was quite as horrible maybe as others did. But at the time, it was a really, really close call for me. So I talked to a lot of people. I visited the properties next door, and it was in my own mind, it was kind of a razor-thin margin. When we first started talking about this, it does make a lot of sense. Having office space downtown is something that we really do need and ought to pursue aggressively. And I think that's why the council collectively went ahead and did this. But it is a finite space, and it's limited as far as what it would support. It does have some significant challenges with regard to the alley. Before we even entertained this, I've been in that alley looking at and considering the pedestrian flow concerns and some things that have happened in or adjacent to that alley. So that pedestrian safety is at the forefront of my mind as I consider all of this. Obviously, I'm not going to belabor the point. The staff has consistently not recommended this for a number of reasons. It doesn't, unfortunately, we have too many veiled threats tonight. I don't know that talking about the other zoning makes sense or is appropriate. I don't consider that in considering your project. I'm not, I guess, holding that against anybody. But I don't want people who feel one way or the other about that to think that weighed into my decision, because it does not. At the end of the day, we own this property. We're making a choice to sell it or not to sell it. And we shouldn't be doing something that makes the environment worse. Okay, if we're going to do something that we're choosing to do, not out of desperation, because we're not desperate, we're certainly financially stressed, but we're not quite to the desperation point, we shouldn't choose to do something that makes it worse than it is. At least the same, preferably a little bit or a lot better, but I feel like this is going to make a situation and a circumstance worse than it is. There are a number of legal concerns. I raised the concerns about the what happens if, the reverter. I appreciate the council's efforts at putting that together. The legalities could probably be solved, but I guess at the end, I don't really want to belabor that point, because while we could solve the legal questions and those details, I don't think that it will ultimately solve the problems with the structure itself. So, while I did originally vote for this, I think the changes and the conditions in this current proposal tip it in the other direction for me, so I don't feel like I can support this this current proposal.
Thank you, Alderman Wilson. Alderman Ruth Simmons.
Thank you. So I disagree. I do believe that this is an emergency. We just received our most recent tax assessments, and affordability is a real issue here. If we want to continue to celebrate our diversity here in Evanston, then some place, somewhere, we have to find some place to compromise. And I am supporting this right now because of all of the reasons of economic activity, why this happened, I believe, before we were on council. I support it for that reason. I have calls from landowners that have received tax assessments more than 100% from last year, and those fees will be carried over to the families that already are having a hard time affording staying here in Evanston. So I don't see where this property would have an impact from the Women's Center doing all of the fantastic things that you have proposed for women in business and everything else that you're doing. I really celebrate that work. But I do have a couple of questions and concerns that I would like answers for. I understand there's a lot of concern about the capacity of the developers and the construction team. And I want to know, for example, when we have a RFP, for example, there's a construction RFP for interior renovations at Fleetwood. I looked at that. And in there's like, can you show 5 projects of similar scope and what's your financial capacity? Can you, staff or whomever, talk to us about how do we vet those that we're doing business with? Because I would not like for us to move forward and us get stuck where we have what I've heard, a hole in the ground and, an unfinished project. So if anyone can speak to what we do to make sure we're doing business with someone that has the capacity to perform what they're proposing to perform.
My name is Laura Biggs. I'm the city engineer. So are you referring to I missed part of the question, I'm sorry, the Levy Center Foundation and how I'm sorry, what was the question?
No. I don't know how I got that confused. So the question was, how do we vet who we're doing business with?
Contractors?
Yes.
So largely what we do is when we put out a bid document for construction costs, then there is in that bid document a page that contractors are required to fill out that lists references for similar types of projects. Sometimes we'll even qualify what types of projects we would consider eligible for that. And then when we get those bid documents, we check them. In addition, a lot of times if we're working with an engineering firm to do design, or if we ourselves have knowledge of the contractor, maybe did a project for Oak Park and they didn't list it as their references, then we will call additional references where we know that they have done work if we have those available to us. If the contractor does not submit adequate references, if we check their references and we feel like it's still a little vague or they weren't quite appropriate, then our purchasing group will often reach back out to the contractor to get those additional references. When we do a request for proposal and we're hiring professional staff, the references are included right within the document. They're hired substantially on their qualifications and their past work.
Is this any different because it would be a private project?
Alderman Ruth Simmons, members of the council, let me try to take that. So this project is unique in that there's a sale of city property with that. So if this was a private development on private land, the issues of the contractors and the partners and the funding are generally things that we do not look at. The issue here is because it's public property.
So I'm asking, we've done all of that, or we will?
We have received information from this developer. There's additional information that was received tonight. I think ultimately it is the council's determination with that. I mean, we're blending several roles of the city council here. We're blending the role as city council as property owner, city council as land use approver, and sometimes those roles get a little blurry and get mixed. And I think the council is rightfully to be thoughtful about all this, because it's not a role that you find yourself in every day.
Well, I don't want any mixed roles on this. I would like for us to, at a minimum, use the same standard that we use in our regular process, just to make sure that we don't get stuck in a project. I mean, I don't know. I haven't had the time to, and don't even know how to investigate the background of the developers, but I'm assuming that someone on staff has done that.
Yeah, we have in response to questions from aldermen. I know individual aldermen have pursued those issues as well.
Okay, and then one more question. So in response, I know that it did not come with a recommendation out of DAPR, and there were some adjustments made since it was in DAPR. Can you speak to those adjustments?
Personally, the adjustments that were made, which I don't think affected the issues surrounding the alley safety that we've been talking about. I think they were more related to parking, so I would have to defer that to one of my colleagues who is.
But before you make the referral, a lot has been talked about regarding the alley. Could you just summarize what the concerns were at DAPR, and then what changes have been made in response to those concerns?
Sure. That is an alley that, as Alderman Nguyen has referred to, we see a lot of pedestrians in. We see pedestrians because people are going to the library, but there is a large dormitory that's Northwestern University Graduate School housing that is there, McManus, and so you see a lot of Northwestern students as well. In addition, you're getting into that part of the downtown where there is a lot of student housing for Northwestern, not just people in the alley. There's people who live in dorms north of the alley, and that provides a really sweet cut through if you're trying to get to Whole Foods or other businesses. So we do see that kind of activity. The concerns that staff raised about the alley is when we look at how the developer is positioning the building, that alley makes right now is a north-south alley that has a diagonal jog. The developer is proposing to put a building cutting out a piece of that alley. So effectively, we would have to vacate a portion of the alley. I mean, we're selling city property, but in the heads of the staff, that's different than, in some ways, than selling part of our public alley space. And so when we do that, it provides what is sort of a wide open visibility around the library lot and around where people are walking in the library, and basically makes it so you have to make a turn and the visibility is blocked. The developer proposes to sort of make that better by putting in a stop sign and a crosswalk, but it's not really an ideal change from the wide open visibility you had before they took a piece of the alley out. In addition, we've talked with them about issues related to snow management. There's a ComEd pole that is right in the area of the library lot and the library loading dock that we've suggested is it's already frequently hit by vehicles. We've suggested that they consider relocating that pole at their expense or putting underground, speaking with ComEd and figuring out how to put underground wires. They have not really responded to that comment, those comments. So I think there's just things that are of concern. We've already tried to make the alley safer by putting in stopgap measures like extra stop signs and striping crosswalks at the end and things like that, but it's going to be difficult to mitigate the effect of the loss of visibility.
So, but it's already a problem alley, right, with pedestrian traffic. I just never seen us work so hard to protect alleyways.
That's what I can't wait to make that
just
point.
the privilege and
Can't wait to make that
my
point.
alley must be pedestrian friendly. It's the first that I'm hearing of this.
You know that I don't put the pedestrians there. I have been asked to try to make the alley as pedestrian-friendly as possible in the past. There are limited things that can be done because it's relatively narrow. There are spaces where the buildings are set back, so then you get what feels like a wide open space, but really the actual property lines are the property lines. And so, I mean, I've even had people ask me, hey, could you put a sidewalk in that alley or various things? And it's really just not feasible with the dimensions of the alley. So then when I'm asked, hey, would this project make it worse for pedestrians or better for pedestrians? I mean, there's a perceived problem with pedestrians. The improvements will not make that better. I cannot control, I don't encourage the pedestrians to walk there. I recommend they walk elsewhere, but the main access from McManus that pedestrians use seems to be off the alley. In addition, there's a building, I'm not really sure who the property owner is, right off the north end of the valley that I think their handicap access, their ADA accessible entrance is off the alley. So those aren't really things that I can change as the city
This may
engineer.
be an opportunity to make it more like an alley and have a property that brings some economic activity to the broader community so that we're legitimate when we say we want to be diverse. So I would ask that the developer give a second look at this poll that you're talking about and see what you can do in response to that. And then I would trust that, and if I could have a response to this poll, I hear staff saying that you didn't respond to that. If I could have a response to that, and then I will trust that our very strong building code enforcement here would mandate a compliant building and safety and so on. So do we have a response to this? Thank you.
Hi, I'm Paul Janicki with Paul Janicki Architects. As far as the poll goes, we're perfectly happy to deal with that. We really always felt that those were sort of civil issues. We have a lot of underground mains and sewers that we're going to have to deal with as well, no matter how we position the building. So this is all part of the next step of project management. It's not really something that typically a developer or an architect actually tackles at this point, but we're more than happy to, and we realize that there's an issue there that we need to sort of fix. So yeah, we're fine with that.
Okay. Nothing more now.
Okay, thank you, Alderman Ruth Simmons. Alderman Braithwaite, and then we'll have Alderman Fleming, and I got a lot of lights up here, so I'll always give you one ahead so we know who the next are. But Braithwaite, and then we'll have Fleming.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'm going to try my best to keep my comments concise. I'm going to skip over the comments that were made about race and women. And I think it's unfortunate sometimes when we talk about these issues, how the history of race, the history of women gets thrown in, and then they pivot back to the issue. That's another conversation. But the issue of alley safety is one that I do find particularly interesting, because if this alley is being deemed as unsafe, Alderman Simmons, I would have to agree with your comments. It makes me, and I used this term 7 years ago and got heated for this, afraid. Because afraid. Because I have some alleys in the West Evanston where people are actually shot and killed. So if this is being deemed unsafety, where we've asked for lighting, we've asked for extra patrolling, good Lord, what does that say about the residents of the West End? So Chief Cook, I would like to make a referral. Looking back at the last 10 years, how many incidents that we've had in that alley and how many shootings that we've had in other alleys citywide, because I'm really concerned about alley safety. Now let me get off that point. I think, Alderman Nguyen, you asked the question of, no, I will make my own points. I would agree with Alderman Ruth Simmons that this does have a strong economic impact. And I've been pretty clear across my 7 years, like, I'm pro-economic development, and my reasons why is because it expands our tax base. And for the same reasons that Alderman Simmons mentioned earlier, we all receive tax letters. And I did get the same phone calls from some of my businesses who have also, you're absolutely right, their tax base has increased over 100%. Bill Halloway, Surf Speed, he called me today and said, I'm getting ready to move to Skokie because I cannot afford the taxes. And I said, Bill, the city of Evanston only represents such a small percentage. He's like, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter where it's coming from, but the fact is that his taxes are going up. And so here we are, and I will pivot back to the budget season just to remind everyone that we were tasked right around this time. We had to carve out and reduce our budget by $7 million. And who was impacted? It wasn't Public Works. It wasn't Parks and Recs. It was the health department and services that provided what? Guess what? To our most vulnerable citizens and women. And here we are, as if, so I'm going to put that on pause also and go into it later. But I do look forward to the people who are so against this. 400 employees, 40,000, wherever that slide is, I think it was 40,800 per week in revenue, $4 million in additional revenue to the city of Evanston. In addition to that, the increased tax base. And so I would agree, again, with Alderman Simmons, that I think somewhere along the line is everyone who embraces this town and all the wonderful things that we do, somewhere there has to be compromise. I want to conclude by, sharing this, and I'm consistently pro-economic development. I find it interesting, and I say this respectfully to Alderman Wilson and Alderman Nguyen. Alderman Wilson, I feel that traditionally you are pro-economic growth as long as we don't subsidize with taxpayer dollars, and that's sort of been my understanding of your voting record. And so I'm a little bit puzzled on this one, just to be honest. I'm sure you'll make those comments. And Alderman Nguyen, I know that you also are pretty consistent with economic development, and I've supported in the past Trader Joe's that was subsidized by taxpayer dollars. I was also supportive of the Main Street project that was highly criticized because of these same issues of parking and congestion, and you were supportive of those. And so I'm, again, I'm going to be supportive of this project for the reasons that I mentioned, and you can all choose to respond to that or to my comments as you wish. But sooner or later, wherever we go with this, however it goes up or down, this time in the next 2 months, we're going to have to figure out where we're going to get probably $4, $5, $6, $7 million out of our budget. And I hope that you all remember this discussion and whatever your vote's going to be this evening. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Alderman Braithwaite. Alderman Fleming, then Alderman Rainey.
So I have a couple questions, and I will talk about race and gender, because I, as a black woman, get highly offended when I'm reminded of things that now non-black people recognize and I'm supposed to applaud. And I'm not saying that you have asked me for applaud, but I will say that in this city that I have lived in for almost my entire 45 years, and my family has been here since the late 1800s, I think it's 2019, and people now are happy to talk about racial tension and racial divides, but there always seems to be a conversation about that when it benefits other people. And so I have been to the Willard House, or the Women's, whatever the new name of it is, one time, because when I was raised with very progressive parents, I learned that Frances Willard's fight did not include black women. It included white women. And when she got when suffrage was passed and women got the right to vote, it was white women, and she was happy to stop there. So I never felt the need to go into the Willard House and celebrate all that she did not do for black women. And while I appreciate that now you all are at a point of having this conversation, it has nothing in my mind to do with this building. I think and I'm getting emotional because I get very frustrated by this, but I think if you all now want to change your mission and be more honest about the history of Frances Willard and others, that's great. It should not stop because a building goes up or doesn't go up. It should be your mission and your passion because you believe it's right. I'm not sure what it has to do at all with this conversation, unless you were trying to use it as a point just to educate us on what the building does. I do find it interesting, as Alderman Fisk pointed out, that there was conversation about there being this incubator behind the house because an incubator is an office building. It's not 11 stories tall, but it's an office building. And I imagine people in that incubator are going to park somewhere and potentially walk through this very dangerous alley that we keep talking about. I also have children. I have 3 children, and they get in and out of cars, and we cross streets, and, you know, some are busier than others, and I teach them the correct way to cross streets, but obviously we all have children. We know they don't all listen. But the idea that I, as a council member, would make a decision about a development based on the convenience of parking or the preference of parking is a little bit of a far stretch, right? I am a woman. I like to park in open air. I like to park convenient places. I also work in an office building downtown that has no parking, where I park in an enclosed lot every day, and I walk and I, you know, check my parameters for safety, and many millions of other people do such a thing as well. So I think to make the case that if we were to build a building here and go to enclosed parking, that, you know, everyone is suddenly unsafe and so on and so forth, is to me a little bit of a stretch. And people are saying that they understand this lot, you know, could be developed and they're not opposed to development. But aside from putting a very small building there or some houses there, anything you put there is going to cause more traffic. And whether it's, you know, 10 more cars or 50 more cars, you're going to have more traffic. And the goal, I think, should be, as Alderman Simmons said, to make the alley safe, to talk to the building owners about, you know, making ADA accessibility off the front of the building, not the back of the building. Talking to the students about using the front where it's well lit and cars can see them, not using it as a cut through. I don't think we can design our city based on the preferences of, you know, potentially a small group of individuals. And I realize that, you know, the gentleman came up and said a petition went around and, you know, more than 30% of the owners objected, but that leaves 70% that didn't object. And so I'm just giving I'm not taking questions. I'm just giving the numbers. I think he said 30%. I didn't memorize it. But nonetheless, and to Alderman Nguyen, in terms of your comment you made that we're getting ready, I think you said we're getting ready to approve a 19-story, what did you say? I'm pretty sure you did.
No, I did not say we're not getting ready to approve. I said there is a 19-story building that is about to be proposed and start to come through the process.
Okay. So
very different
okay,
statement.
all right. Thanks for clarifying. So I don't know how we can even start to throw that out there, even though it's, you know, can go through the process. When we've spent 3 years on an 11-story building, we had that same space, if I'm correct. This is the space over the Chase drive-through that came through as an apartment building, and we, you know, didn't get very far. Part of it was because of the bike lanes and turning in and out and all the traffic that would have to cross over the bike lanes and so on and so forth. So I can't even wrap my mind around us having a conversation about a 19-story building versus this 3-year conversation on 11-story. And then my other comment for the public, and this goes just to the people who made the mention, I heard over the last couple of weeks all this mention of our brilliant staff and how Dapper is professional, and they, you know, they said no, and P&D or, you know, all the other boards that said no to this. And I find that really fascinating because when I first got up here, there was the Emerson Project, there was Vermillion, and everyone said, you know, our staff was crazy. How could they propose this? And it's horrible, and it's going to ruin the city, and so on and so forth. And I voted no to one of them for different reasons. But, you know, we're the same people here. So we hear you when you come up one day and say, our staff doesn't know what they're talking about. You know, they're not following the law, so on and so forth. But then when they agree with you, it's like our staff are the most brilliant people. How could you not agree with them? Our staff are paid, and I think that, you know, they do the best job they can, but we are elected to make the decisions. And, you know, like it or not, and you have the right to vote us out, and you have the right to, you know, sit in these seats. But our staff advises, but they are not the law. And so while they give their recommendations, we have tons of other things that we also have to consider, whether it's economic, whatever it is. I know I have a ward meeting every month. I've heard from a very small amount of people who object to this building. I've heard from a very small amount of people who even know about this building. Most of what I hear about are people talking about Robert Crown and taxes and so on and so forth. So not to say this building is not important, but just because it's very important to you all and you have the right to pick your battles doesn't mean that the entire city is against it. And sometimes we come in with the narrative of, you know, myself and my neighbors don't like it, and so it's the worst thing in the world. I remember as a little girl picketing that building on the corner by the where Weebolt's used to be, or Walgreens or whatever it was. I think it was Weebolt's, on the corner of Oak and Church, with my grandmother. She said it was going to ruin the city. God bless her heart. We picketed and people hated it, and the blue glass, and I do think it's an ugly building, but the city has moved on. I remember when we had cobblestone streets, and I was little, and they were covered over, and my aunt said it was ruining the charm of the city. I remember when Evanston First Liquor opened, and I think we picketed then too. But I say all that just to say things change, and as my colleagues have mentioned about compromise, if every time something comes before us, apartment building, affordable housing, you know, this group of people come forward and they want to cite all the zoning laws and the history and whatever else and how great the city is, I don't know how great we can be if we oppose everything that we personally don't like. That's what I'm going to say. There's many things in this town I personally don't like, but I understand that I'm one of almost 80,000 people. And if I wanted a city that operated, you know, just for me, then I need to go buy land somewhere else and name it Cicelyville and live there. But I live in a city where there are a lot of people and we have lots of opinions and lots of compromises. So I would hope that regardless of what happens with this building, we can all think through how to live together and compromise, and understanding that our preferences don't mean that it's necessarily the best thing in the world. It means we have a preference.
Thank you. Thank you, Alderman Fleming. We've got Alderman Rainey. I may then have a question that I pose, and then we'll have Alderman Fisk. Believe me, I got a ton of lights here, so I'm only given one in advance. So Fisk will know that she comes after me if I ask a question, and then I'll name the next one, which will be you, Alderman Ravel.
One of the things we did this week was we had a meeting. Several of us asked to meet with some of the developer people because of Alderman Wilson's concerns that the developer did not have the capacity to build this building. And he indicated to many of us that he had done research indicating that he could not determine that there had been other projects or that there had been financing, et cetera. And it was my understanding that the development team was coming here tonight with proof and evidence that they could share with the council, and Alderman Simmons raised this issue. Show us your stuff. And I am asking right now the mayor to allow the developer team to come to the podium and tell us the background of the developer. I know the attorney said that, you know, the nun at Resurrection loved him and had a building. But I want to hear more. Also that, I mean, you challenged Alderman Wilson, the developer, to tell you whether McShane was the contractor. There's no project yet. There's no contractor. There's no commitment for financing. I mean, they do have an architect, and I wanted to go to Alderman Nguyen's point. We did vote against it because it was the ugliest building I ever saw in my life. And I think now it's one of the best looking office buildings, 11 stories. It's not easy to make a really good looking building. But I think the building is really good looking. And I agree with Alderman Fisk that they have really designed a really nice looking building. So show us your stuff.
No problem.
I
just want
Alderman Simmons to hear. And I thought, City Manager, you were in that meeting, and I really think that you did not indicate that you had an answer for Alderman Simmons. So let's have the developer tell us.
No problem.
This is what you were asking, I think.
Right.
Yes.
Just the city staff has done a wonderful job looking at due diligence on me. Just to recap, 2.5 years ago, there was an RFP addendum done, which I'm the one who picked Connor Commercial and McShane and wrote the RFP with Connor Commercial. We went through Alderman Fisk's rigorous community meetings, and the public said, fire your architect and fire these guys. So I did. We had an RFP addendum, which the council sent out Marty Lyons, who's a former CFO, and Paul Zalmazek to do a dog and pony show for a day to see what the developer has done. So you guys sent an after the RFP addendum goes, go check this guy out. So the second project we went to, if you can click. It's got it. Oh, sorry.
There you go.
So this is a project I developed in 2006. It's 120,000 square feet, about 10,000 square feet less than the proposed office building. It's a supportive living facility. I'm the one who picked the land, I picked the architect, I raised the money. So Mr. Lyons and Mr. Zelmazek spent 2 hours kicking the tires on this property. They went through it, they met the operator, they did everything. We went out to lunch at Elliott's in Downers Grove because Marty Lyons lived there. That was a property I finished in 2006, 100% occupied, supportive living facility. Probably why I stayed around here is because, and in the meeting, if you recall, Connor said, we weren't going to give, it was a 3-year deal. We're out. It's not going to take 3 years. So I'm the smart guy, and I thought, you know what, this project took me 2 years to do. So I went through the entire entitlement. Marty Lyons, Paul Zamazek walked the building. This is a property that's 100% affordable at 5525 West Diversey. This is a project that I'm used to because it's got a lot of NIMBY. It's 100% affordable. So it's made up of studios and 1-bedrooms. We're going to be finished with this project in April 2019. Anybody from the council could come and take a look. Okay, it's about 74,000 square feet. It was approved through Alderman Raboyes' ward, and half the building's filled up with CHA. So that was a little bit of going through that community meeting was pretty not easy. Okay, there's the different view of it. This building is an LGBTQ 88-unit building in Logan Square going up as we speak. This is a real difficult building. It looks like the Flatiron building from New York. It was a controversial project in then Alderman Moreno's ward in the city of Chicago. I put the financing together. It's about 25% complete. It was a very hard project. It's going to be similar to this one because it's a steel frame, and then the curtain wall is going to be precast. So that's a project that I went through zoning. I'm the one who put all the financing together. I did it all. There's the plans, and this is the project Sisters of Resurrection. It's 72,000 square feet. It's at 7432 West Talcott. Sister Virginia Ann, who we both know. That's kind of how we. Well,
is that new construction?
This is a rehab, so it's an existing convent. What happened was the nuns. There was about 13 nuns left in this property, and they couldn't take care of it anymore. So it's the missing link in a continuum care. You have a SNF next door, you have a hospital across the street, and you have independent senior housing. So this is going to be converted to 72 units. We're probably going to close the end of May, early June. I'm the lead developer. So just to be transparent, there was an addendum. Marty Lyons, Paul Zalmazek went through Downers. They also went through, they didn't want me to show too many. I also have a property in Chicago Heights and Blue Island. I'm a senior housing developer. It's probably interesting why I stayed for 3 years going through the entitlement, because I'm used to people not liking affordable housing in their backyard. So I'm used to going through the process. And the irony in it is this, is that the team that I put together is stronger than any team that I've put together. As far as the financing, the carpenters union, I have the equity raised. This project is stronger than any development I've put together. See, what I do is, as the developer, I arrange the team, and this team is stronger than ever. And it's just striking to me that I feel like I have a target, because, it's like when you enter in a contract, there's a covenant of good faith. Both parties work in good faith. And I've been working in good faith, and Alderman Fisk, you back for 3 years in this town. 3. And I just...
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Greg.
Very
Are there
much.
any other questions for the developer right now? Okay. Did you have anything else? I'm sorry, who was I on? Alderman Rainey, did you have anything else?
No,
before I move on?
but the finance team is here too, several different groups from the finance world, if she wants to ask any questions.
Okay, so they're here as well, if any.
Let me say one thing about the alley. For years, I've asked for signs in my alleys. And, you know, we've had arguments that children like to play in this alley. No, people aren't supposed to be walking around hanging out in alleys. I mean, it's just unsafe. So I think the alley thing is just kind of a fake issue. I know that it has a kink in it, and that's not a good thing for any alley. But I will tell you that since I got involved and Alderman Fisk has made me see the light on this project, I have been down in that neighborhood quite a lot. I sat in that parking lot numerous times lately. And in the daytime, anybody in the Carlson building who is concerned about not having a place to park they're just wrong, because that parking lot is basically vacant in the daytime. You know that. If you're over there, Alderman Wilson, I don't know if you're around in the daytime, but it is. And any dentist who's in the Carlson building has absolutely no concerns whatsoever about somebody being able to park. And Camille Halim, he has absolutely no concerns. Either does Celtic Knot for their lunch crowd, because you cannot call their lunch patrons a crowd. And there's just not a problem whatsoever. So, and it's going to be fine. At nighttime, that's a different story. We want our downtown to be crowded at night. That means things are happening. And there's nothing like an 11-story building going to lunch in our downtown restaurants. Maybe Celtic Knot will be crowded at lunchtime. You might even have to get a reservation finally, because that certainly isn't the case now. So I would think Celtic Knot would be over here hugging this developer instead of fighting him.
Thank you, Alderman Rainey. City Attorney, I just have a question. Is it typical, and I'm not sure on past developments where the city, I guess, has owned the property and we have a map change to bundle the zoning change and the development itself together? Because that's, as I understand SP3, we've bundled them together, meaning the map change and the plan development. And I'm just curious on the history there. Is that typically what the practice is of the city of Evanston, or is it to say, hey, the council takes a vote on the map change and then they consider whatever developments are that are in accord with that new zoning?
To answer your question, not with respect to city property, but I think I'm looking at Johanna, we have done it for 831 Emerson. Is that the development that had this? Yeah, okay, 831 Emerson, it was bundled. The development that's at the Sherman and Emerson, that's going up right now.
Yeah,
so
I remember that one.
A year and a half ago.
Okay, so it is.
That had a map amendment and a plan development as one ordinance.
Okay. So is it fair to say that's the standard process in the city to do that?
That's what I'm saying, 831 Emerson.
831 Emerson, that's what she was referring to, yes.
The Custer plan development that was introduced at the last council meeting also included a map amendment, and that was bundled together in one ordinance.
Okay. There's been lots of other developments in the past, right, here in Evanston. I'm just trying to understand.
They don't always require a map amendment, so the ones that do require a map amendment, we put them together.
Okay, and that's always sort of the practice?
As long as I've been here.
Okay. All right. Alderman Fisk.
That doesn't mean we have to do it that way. Is that correct, Johanna? Well, I mean, we could do it. Yeah. We could do it another way. So
we could do it another way. That is the way that it's published and noticed.
Right. Okay. Okay, I want to address some of the things about the alley, because that's been, I'm assuming that Alderman Wilson and other aldermen, that's where their focus is. This is, again, I'm going to the downtown belongs to all of us, absolutely belongs to all of you, belongs to everyone. It is my ward. I spend an extraordinarily large amount of time over there. When we were doing the bike lanes on Chicago Avenue, I stood on Chicago Avenue for 3 days and talked to every single person riding a bike on Chicago Avenue. I mean, I know how this particular property is used. I also know from experience with staff that we do not encourage pedestrians to use the alleys. That's not what our alleys are for. There is no direct access through this alley to anything but the side wall of Whole Foods. And for that reason, we paid to widen the sidewalk on Chicago Avenue from Clark Street all the way over to Church. And so we doubled the size of that sidewalk. If you are looking to run into anyone to ask them a question, you would not stand in that alley. You would stand on the sidewalk in front of the buildings. A couple of other points here. I've had conversations with people who are concerned about the safety in the alley in terms of how the parking lot is used. Right now, you've got 4 stalls of parking, 4 lanes of parking, I would say, that you have to contend with. So if you're getting out of your car, you're crossing, usually diagonally if you're going to the library, you're crossing diagonally across a parking lot where there are moving cars and an alley where there can be other moving cars. The beauty, I'm wondering where staff is, if they can put up the slide of the alley again. No one's here to do that, so maybe we don't do that. But when the issue of, first of all, the dog leg in the alley was created by us. When we tore down the house that was just to the west of the Women's Clubhouse, that made the dog leg in the alley. So that we've created our own problem there, but now, of course, we have to live with that and deal with that. And so what the developer did when the question was raised about visibility in the alley, sight lines in the alley, what the architects did was come up with what I thought was a really good solution, and that is take the solid wall away, and we show you that in a second here, take the solid wall away and replace it with columns so that your sight line down that alley has been now increased. We're trying to get the view down the alley that you would put up. Right there. So you can see where the columns are now. You can see all the way down to that alley, almost, past McManus and going down there. The other thing that I hear what some of you are saying, that women don't like to park in a parking garage. We have lots of parking garages in Evanston, and women park there all the time. If you go downtown, you're parking in a parking garage. Benefits of the parking garage is that there is on-site security, a real person, security person in the parking garage. There is protection from the elements, and it also funnels people directly out of the parking garage across a dedicated crosswalk. If you can go back to that, there, I think there's another slide of the crosswalk up there. So everyone's coming out of the parking garage now. Rather than crossing willy-nilly across from the open parking lot, they're coming out of the parking garage at one specific location across a dedicated crosswalk and into the library, on the sidewalk and into the library. It's a much safer situation than it would have been, than exists now. The other point that was mentioned, I don't remember who brought it up, but it was about the handicapped access from 1738 Chicago Avenue. I was not on the council when that was built. I don't know who on our staff allowed them to put a handicap access into the alley. That handicap access can easily be turned so that it goes out onto Chicago Avenue. The developer has indicated it's a willingness to move that handicapped access onto the Chicago Avenue double sidewalk, and that is definitely where it belongs. Just 2 more real quick points. The side yard setbacks, I think we're more than 30 feet, or the building is more than 30 feet away from the Women's Club building, and probably a lot more than that, and at least 25 feet away from the first house, which is not a landmark on the WCTU property. There is, neither one of these properties are going to be visually damaged because of the existence of this building. Final point is that I have not been able to figure out about the Celtic Knot. I don't know about the rest of you, but I can go into the Celtic Knot and they know my standing order. I frequent the Celtic Knot. This project is going to only benefit the Celtic Knot and the other restaurants and the other businesses in the downtown. And the Celtic Knot is going to not only survive, but it's going to prosper because of this building, just the way the other businesses are too. Again, it's an important project for Evanston. I strongly suggest that you revisit your vote, Alderman Wilson.
Thank you, Alderman Rainey. Alderman Revelle, and then Alderman Wilson.
I won't try to belabor this. I mean, the alley safety is on my list of things that I am concerned about, but we've pretty much talked it to death. I guess my primary concern, and I've mentioned this in my previous comments, is that this is a very special, sensitive site between two important Evanston landmark properties, and the height and the bulk of the proposed project are significantly greater than those of the adjacent properties. And I agree that the neighboring buildings aren't right up against their property line, their side yards, but the minimal side yard setbacks of only 5 feet on the north and the south side really do add to the feeling of a too large building looming over its neighbors. The zoning ordinance states that the planned development shall be compatible with the surrounding development, and in my view, I don't believe the proposed development is in fact compatible with its landmark neighbors. I hear what Alderman Rue Simmons has said and Alderman Braithwaite about the importance of improving our tax base and our tax revenues, and I agree with Alderman Fleming. It's not a slam dunk that the proposed office building that's going to be coming to us on Davis Street, it's not a guarantee that we're going to approve it. We haven't seen anything for it yet, but it does sound very promising, and I'm looking to that to be where we're going to get some significant new revenues. One topic that hasn't been gone into at great length yet tonight is parking. We did hear from Mr. Flayton earlier, the owner of the Chandler's building, and he did send us a very detailed communication a number of weeks ago where he talked about the fact that we have a fixed supply of off-street public parking, and that it serves the needs of the tenants and the clients and the customers of our older legacy buildings in our downtown that have no off-street parking. So the proposed project, we haven't really talked about this much at all, would remove 203 spaces from this finite supply of public parking through a long-term lease of spaces in one or more of our city garages. And I guess I ask whether this is fair to the older legacy properties in our downtown, the vintage buildings that contribute so much to the character of our downtown that we really value. I think our small businesses rely on a good supply of public off-street parking for their employees and their customers, and we should not chip away at this valuable resource.
All right, thank you, Alderman Revelle. We've got Alderman Wilson, then Alderman Nguyen.
I'm going to try to, as much as possible, limit it to things that we haven't talked about much, but the original RFP response, this is not the original RFP respondent, so it's just not the same respondent. We got a package, we voted on it, it's Connor Commercial Real Estate. There's a cover letter, there are references, there are drawings, there are resumes, there are contact points, and it's not the same team. It's not that this team is a bad team, it's just not the same team. So I think it's not unreasonable to wonder about these issues. I do note that through the course of the negotiations, the entities have changed. We've got MHDC SLF was originally in the contract, now it's Chicago Avenue Partners. The LLC members are different. I think, Mr. Steck, I tried to take a quick look at some of the projects. it looks like some of them are Metropolitan Housing Development Corporation projects. Is that the developer who's doing the projects?
Metropolitan Housing Development Corporation is a non-for-profit I work with. I have a non-for-profit arm and a for-profit arm. So not MHDC, what my responsibility is to put all the financing, arrange the architect, put the deal together. So what you're seeing is a product of what I've done. That's my skill set. So MHDC is a preferred developer of the CHA. Part of the biggest is $9.3 million in capital improvement dollars from the CHA that balance the capital stack. My role was to go get the money, get the architect, put everything together. So what you're seeing on the screen is my skill set. But we need the non-for-profit involved to bring that was a tougher hearing as well. That was a 4% bond deal with light tech credits, filled the gap with CHA capital improvement dollars along with TIF. That's all me. That's what I do.
Okay. And again, back to the thing that I originally voted on was basically a design build complete package. And it's not to say that you can't pull all that together. You might be great at that, but it's just different than what I was,
right. I understand all of it. So basically what happened was, and why there was an RFP addendum, I sought out Connor because I knew McShane from construction, knew they had a development arm. I'm the one who sat with the folks at Connor, developed the RFP, and then when I went to the community meetings, they said there was a bowing out of Brian Quigley, who I brought to the table because he didn't want to go through the 3 years of entitlement. I met with Jim McShane, as I said, and Alderman Rainey in our meeting, and Jim McShane said, well, kid, go for it, but we want to stay in for the construction. Then Paul Zalmazek had an RFP addendum in the minutes stating that Connor had bowed out. This is January 2017. It was all on public record, and that Mr. Steck was saying is the lead. That was in the RFP minutes, and it was voted on 6 months prior to signing the contract, and it was all public. So
okay.
I don't know. I'm trying not to sound. I'm just trying to be transparent is all.
No, which I appreciate, and it's just I think it's relevant to all of us that we know who's going to build the building. It's our property. We want to make sure that it happens. That's why we talked about all these things. All right, so thanks. I appreciate that openness.
And just for the record, so when Paul Zalmazek and Marty Lyons came out, it was thrust upon me that I thought they were instructed by council to say, go do due diligence on the developer, and that's why they came out and saw 3 properties.
Makes sense. So on a couple of other points, Alderman Braithwaite, I understand your point on the the alley safety thing, but I think we would all agree that if you have a condition that's not ideal or a condition, and we're not talking about people, as far as I'm aware, getting mugged or shot at or anything like this. We're talking about safety as far as how the traffic for all the modes of transportation, including pedestrians, is concerned. But I don't think any of us would choose to intentionally make an existing situation worse. At least I don't think we would. Back to the point about the the subsidy. We're not really we're not writing a check here. But when we undertook this, we were expecting a certain level. It was like the $5 million. We've cut that down, trying to get it to fit the parameters. We did have 2 respondents who advised us that they didn't think they could make it work. But we're making a significant zoning change. So, I think all of these points in conjunction with that are relevant and important.
Thank you, Alderman Wilson. Alderman Nguyen, then Alderman Ruth Simmons.
I want to be brief. As Alderman Wilson said, I view this as a functioning alley, and my view was that it was making it not function as well. And I appreciate the issues that we always have in alleys. Actually, I wanted to address Alderman Braithwaite's point. At the main Chicago building, we required them to put in all of the required parking. We required them to put in so much required parking that we required them to purchase a lot north of Hemingway Church so that the excess parking from their building would go there. In addition, the alley mouth there, if you all know Main and Chicago, right next to Lucky Platter, tremendous amount of pedestrian traffic, lots of great businesses. We required the developer to widen the alley. We required the developer to set the building back so the visibility was better. We made that alley safer, an alley that is notoriously difficult, with frequently clogged with trucks. 144 people park their cars, and that is the only access in and out of their alley. And not to put too fine a point on it, someone was knifed to death in that alley shortly after I became alderman. I want all of our alleys in the city to be safe for everyone, everywhere. And I will support anyone who wants to put more lighting and more police patrols in every alley, in any alley that they need to have that. I also want to make a point that at 831 Emerson, which is very large, I voted to support that building because the developer there responded to requests that several of us made up here on the council about setting it back from the property and for it to increase the sidewalk around it and to make it not as tight onto the property, to the property lines. That developer accommodated that. It's a very big building. It's a type of zoning I don't particularly like in the city, but that developer responded to that, and I supported that building. So for all of the reasons I stated earlier, I don't think that this building meets the standards. I don't think that the public benefits that are being provided are sufficient. And so I am voting no.
Thank you, Alderman Nguyen, Alderman Ruth Simmons, and then Alderman Fisk.
There was just a lot of talk about the Celtic Knot. I just wanted to encourage everyone to go there and have lunch. It's really good. They have a really good high tea service on Wednesdays and Saturdays. It's very affordable, much less than the Drake. That's it.
Thank you. I also heard they had a great St. Patrick's Day this past weekend.
And great live music.
All right, we got just two more lights on. We've got Alderman Fisk and then Alderman Braithwaite.
No, I don't want the last word. You can have the last word. Okay, well, since Alderman Nguyen brought it up, I do have to address 831 Emerson, also in my ward. On that particular site, I was concerned about the canyonization of Emerson Street and concerned about the setback of this building. And Alderman Revelle and Alderman Nguyen took it upon themselves to take a walk over there. They decided that a 3.5-foot setback was acceptable. That's what passed the city council. I was asking for a 27-foot setback, which I think would have accommodated that and prevented the canyonization of that street. All you need to do is walk over there and take a look at it and see what happens. So that said, I just, again, want to emphasize to my colleagues on the council why it was we voted for the RFP and why the RFP passed this council. We have been losing the small businesses that we have been incubating for years. We see them grow, we see them prosper, and then we don't have the office space for them to move into. They leave and go to Chicago or another community. That has happened over and over and over again. As a small business owner, I think I can speak uniquely to how important it is to have feet on the street. There's a letter in our packet that talks about how if 601 Davis Street comes along, and remember it did not pass staff last time, but if 601 Davis Street does come along, there's going to be plenty of opportunity for both of these office buildings to be filled. We're going to benefit. We're going to get the revenue, not only the revenue from these buildings, but we're also going to get the people in our downtown who are going to support our downtown through thick and thin. And if you think that it's not difficult for a small business owner to succeed in the limited retail space, the vintage retail space in the downtown, then you have another thing coming. We have sat through meetings with real estate agents who have told us over and over again that we don't have enough office space. And that's what we're trying to address here. So for the Women's Club, I understand your concerns. This happens all the time with folks that are adjacent to sites that are going to have development. I recently had that, as I mentioned before, with the Hyatt Extended Stay Hotel on Chicago Avenue. That is surrounded by condo buildings that are directly impacted by how that site was being developed. They're all happy with it. They watched the construction very carefully. We had issues with the alley, with access. We had flagmen in the alley. Everyone had, it worked well. Everyone had access to their businesses and to their condo buildings. There were no problems there because we addressed them, and we're good at addressing those issues here in Evanston. I think this is a great mistake to vote this down. I frankly do not understand it.
Thank you.
And for both of the Women's Club and the WCTU, both of which are not-for-profits, both of which pay no property taxes, but do good charitable work, and I appreciate that, you need to stop and understand what it is that we are trying to do. That we have a city that depends on property tax revenue. We went through a painful budget process. We lost employees. We had to cut services. This is very hard. We're asking you, and we have asked you from the beginning, to come and partner with us on this. And I'm sorry that I thought we were there a couple of years ago. Apparently, we're not. And I'm sorry about that.
Thank you, Alderman Fisk. Alderman Braithwaite.
Just to clarify the 2 points of Alderman Wilson and Alderman Nguyen, and I'm going to say it again because I really plan on addressing this later. There were some issues of race. They were brought up earlier, and classification of women that I really want to make sure that at a later point I cover those comments. But the reason that I talked about the alley and the safety of alley, because neighborhood safety is my number one priority in my ward. And so if there is such a concern about this alley, I regret the fact that I haven't heard those concerns prior to this discussion. And I feel like as we talk about developments, the issue of parking comes up quite a bit. And if I was to prioritize that, and it is an important issue, it's part of our community, there are some other things that I would have to prioritize over that. And in fact, I would walk a block. I would walk 2 blocks. Hell, 3 if I knew that we're going to get $4 million infused into our budget. If I knew that there are 400 jobs that are going to be created that our Evanston residents can apply to. If it means increasing our tax base when we're going to face another difficult budget season. And so for those reasons, I'm going to support this and ask for the compromise for it to move forward. And again, I'm taking a real good snapshot of the comments that were made and the people that are in the room, because this time comes September, November, we're going to be arguing, trying to figure out how we're going to save employees' jobs, how we're going to hopefully not cut necessary services to our vulnerable citizens that make our town so amazing. And I just really hope that you remember what your vote is going to be this evening. Thank you. And I would like to call the question if that's possible.
It is possible.
Is there a second? Okay.
You need to vote on call the question.
Jesus, I did that before. Let me withdraw that. All right, fine.
All right, the question's been called.
Mayor,
We
you
have to
need to
take a
vote
vote.
on-
I have a light on, so we got to. The call for questions not debatable. So it was been seconded. So we got to take a vote about calling the question.
It's not debatable.
It's not debatable.
We don't want to hear from the attorney for this.
You guys just called the question, so we've got to take a vote on the question. Okay, so City Clerk, could you take the roll?
Just to clarify, that it's to call the question.
This is to call the question. We're not voting on the actual ordinance right now. We're voting to whether to vote on the ordinance. So everybody's clear on that. All right, if we can do a voice vote on that, all in favor of calling the question on SB 3?
Aye.
And all opposed?
No.
Yes.
All right, I got 2 opposed, so the question's being called. SP 3, Ordinance 4-0-19, map amendment and plan development for 1714 to 1720 Chicago Avenue. City Clerk, could you please call the roll on this?
Certainly. Alderman Ravel.
No.
Wait. Could you please, the vote no is.
So everybody understands, so everybody.
Yes is to deny, right?
No.
No is no. And yes.
It's a double negative?
No.
For purposes of the record, why don't you just clarify what is being voted on?
Say again?
To approve the plan development and map amendment subject to SP3.
Yes. So this is to approve the map amendment, which changes this to D3, and to approve the plan development at 1714 to 1720 Chicago Avenue. So if you vote no, you're voting against that. If you vote yes, you're voting for that. Okay, so Alderman Ravel went first. She voted no. Alderman Rainey.
Yes.
Go ahead, Clerk. Calling the roll.
Sorry, Clerk.
Alderman Rainey, Alderman Fleming.
Yes.
I'm sorry, Alderman Rainey, can you repeat your answer? I apologize.
Alderman Rainey wants you to go again.
Yes.
Okay. Alderman Fleming.
Yes.
Alderman Ravel. Alderman Fisk, I mean.
Aye.
Alderman Braithwaite. Alderman Nguyen. Alderman Wilson. Alderman Ruth Simmons.
Aye.
Alderman Suffredin.
Okay. All right. So SP3 fails to pass 5-4. Just so everybody understands, what was required is this vote, because there was a map amendment, required 7 votes of the city council to pass. Just as an observation, as a person that presides over these hearings, I very much believe, and people hear me talk about this all the time, in representative democracy and what the folks up here are doing. Generally speaking, on plan developments where there are significant variances, those require a supermajority of the Evanston City Council, which means it takes 6 votes, and that's an ordinance that was put in place a long time ago. If there's a map change,
With a citizen's petition.
and the citizens petition, which happened in this case, then that requires 7 votes of the city council to pass. And so, I asked the question earlier just because I wanted to understand if bundling, a zoning request and the plan development is something that we do, and apparently we've done it before, is just something I think the city council needs to consider. I think just on future projects, you could have projects here that pass the city council on a 6-3 vote, but if these are bundled together, okay, it's going to fail because you've put the map change and the development together in the same vote.
That's a good point.
So I just, again, representative democracy is the folks up here, the majority, and the majority, by the way, was 5-4 tonight, but that did not pass. That failed because we needed 7 votes because the map. And had that just been on the development itself, my understanding is this development would have passed on a 5-4 vote.
Mayor, and item SP4 is now moot. That's the right of
Correct.
recorder.
So SP4 we don't need to go to. So we're going to move on the agenda. I do want to thank the developer for all of your work and a long process working with the city. I want to thank everybody else that came out as well, speaking passionately about this project.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll acknowledge that. I'll do that. Okay. All right. Alderman Nguyen has to step out at this point to take care of a family matter, and we'll continue with the 8 aldermen and myself. SP4 no longer applies since SP3 did not pass. SP5, which was city council goals, city manager, did you want to make a comment on that?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, we'll bring that back another evening.
Okay. We're going to move now to SP6. Alderman Wilson, could you introduce that for action?
Sure. SP6, staff is recommending that the City Council adopt Ordinance 19019, directing the city manager to offer the sale of vehicles owned by the city through public auction at the Northwest Municipal Vehicle Auction being sponsored by America's Auto Auctions on Tuesday, March 26, 2019, or any other subsequent America's online auction, not to be confused with America Online. These vehicles have been determined to be surplus as a result of new vehicle replacements and being placed into service, or vehicles that had to be taken out of service for safety reasons with the intention of eventual replacement. This is for action.
Second.
All right, seeing no lights for discussion, City Clerk, could you take the, let's see, do I need a roll on this?
It's an ordinance.
It's an ordinance, so could you take the roll, please? On SP6.
Alderman Ravel. Aye. Alderman Rainey.
Aye.
Alderman Fleming. Aye. Alderman Nguyen. I'm sorry, Alderman Fisk. Yep. Alderman Braithwaite. Yep. Alderman Nguyen.
She has left the meeting.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Alderman Wilson.
Aye.
And then Alderman Ruth Simmons.
Aye.
And Alderman Sufford. Aye.
All right. So SP6 Ordinance 19-0-19, sale of surplus property fleet vehicles, passes the Evanston City Council on an 8-0 vote. We're now going to move to SP7. Alderman Braithwaite, could you introduce that for action?
Yes, Madam Mayor. I'd like to move item SP7, and this is for action. It's the 2018 Consolidated Annual Performance and Evaluation Report for the city's Community Development Block Grant Home Investment Partnership and Emergency Solutions.
Is there a second?
Second. I don't know.
Seeing no discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. SP7 passes on a vote of 8-0. Let's see. Alderman Ruth Simmons, could you introduce SP8?
Yes. SP8, staff and the Human Services Committee recommend approval of the 2019 special events proposal in city parks, contingent upon compliance of all requirements as set forth by the special event policy and guidelines. This year's calendar includes 1 new park event, 1 million steps for OCD walk, cost for city services provided for events require 100% reimbursement from the sponsoring organization or event coordinator. These fees are waived for city events and city co-sponsored events. It's for action.
Second.
All right, seeing no discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, 2019 Special Events City in the Parks passes on an 8-0 vote. We're now going to move to call of the wards. Alderman Ravel.
I'd just like to mention that the community is invited Sunday, March 31st from 2 to 5 p.m. to the American Legion building. They're having a celebration of an award that I have to say I had never heard of before, the Spats Award. It's the highest award that's given by the Civil Air Patrol, and it's been given to Cadet Colonel Grossman, who was instrumental in getting a Civil Air Patrol Colonel Compton Squadron based at Haven Middle School, which is an opportunity for young people to learn more about the Civil Air Patrol. So anyway, the community is invited Sunday, March 31st, 2 to 5 p.m. to the American Legion building.
Great, thank you. Alderman Rainey.
I have no report about upcoming events, but I would like to say during this meeting, I got several emails from people regarding their reassessment, and it is not pretty.
Yeah. Alderman, I'd like somebody, if somebody could look up, because I want to make the statement before this meeting ends. Commissioner Suffredin is having a session this coming Thursday. I just want to make sure we get that publicized, if somebody doesn't mind. Maybe Clerk Reed, if you can pull that up, and we can mention that at the end. Alderman Fleming.
It's part of my announcements, but I'm happy to defer to the clerk.
Terrific. Then thank you.
So I'm not having I have a ward meeting scheduled for Thursday, this Thursday the 21st, and I'm actually canceling it in hopes that people will attend Commissioner Suffredin's Property Tax Appeal Workshop, which is happening at 6:30 this Thursday evening here at City Hall and Council Chambers, and I believe there will be space for overflow. And people have talked about the county property tax assessment letters came out. I know my home is now valued at $150,000 more than it was last year.
You too?
Apparently I've done some, renovations somewhere. But anyhow, it's very important that people do that. It's really the best chance you have of trying to get your property tax lowered if possible. So that is Thursday, 6:30 in council chambers. You need to just bring your tax bill or your PIN number, please. My other announcement is that before coming here, I went over to a memorial service that Connections for the Homeless had. They had a community memorial for 4 of our neighbors who were homeless who have died in the last year. And so it was very moving to see some family members and hear them spoken of. And so as always, I encourage us to make sure that we don't forget about those in our community who are sleeping outside or in cars or various places. And then my last comment has to do with what this mayor mentioned about the boys basketball team. They had a phenomenal season. I think I didn't even see them play because I hadn't gone, but I want to make sure that as we recognize them, there's, as the mayor said, lots of phenomenal things that happen at the high school. And having a daughter who is there, she sees what she thinks is some disparities, whether it's in her mind or not. So I want to recognize one student. He actually is a boy, but this junior varsity state debate champion Liv is a sophomore at the high school. Super quiet kid. You'd never know that he was a debater. African-American young man. He joined debate last year. He went to their state championship and he came home with a trophy, which is quite amazing. So I just want to make sure as we recognize people that we see the full people. We see the students who don't win championships but try their hardest. And so I'm a big proponent of that, or big supporter of that as well, as I know we all are. So I want to recognize Quinn Hughes for his outstanding performance in debate.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you, Alderman Fleming. Alderman Braithwaite.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I want to go back to the conversation of earlier. There's an announcement that I received from Mr. Brown. So for those high school students who are 16 and above and for whatever reason they missed the youth job fair, that the City of Evanston Youth Job Center, along with the State Department of Human Services, will host a job fair. It's going to be at the Levy Center May 23rd, and the time is from 3 to 6. And again, that's for students who are ages 16 and up. I also want to thank the residents who came out to our last ward meeting, and then also thank and acknowledge members of council, the mayor, Alderman Ravel, Alderman Fleming, that supported our chessmen club over the weekend in honoring Brother Oliver Ruff and Chuck Lewis and 2 other students, as well as Chief Cook and Chief Scott that left. I want to follow up on my comments that I made earlier, and I'm looking forward, Alderman Nguyen, I hope your husband has a speedy recovery. I did make a referral, and I want the police department to provide the data in looking back at the past 10 years where there have been violent crimes committed in alleys. If you recall, prior to this discussion, I shared with members of council, I made a referral to our Community and Economic Development, looking at you, Director Naiden, that our staff get in touch with ComEd in the 2 areas that we've been fighting for, probably the 3 of us in the 5th, 5th, and 8th, is looking at revenue streams to provide alley lighting for that exact same reason. So again, and I don't say it flippantly, that if this alley in the middle of downtown that I haven't really heard of many situations is a concern of safety, then I really want to move quickly with a priority that we look at our alleys where we know that there are bad things that are happening. So I hope that Carlo is going to be at that meeting. We've had conversations about other municipalities that are using funds to provide lighting, and for $84 per light, I want to be able to look at those areas and make sure that there's some real data combined where things are happening. So that's the reason for my referral. The second thing is tomorrow, on a lighter note, more fun, I want to thank our city manager, Parks and Recs Department, and Public Works. We have a meeting to discuss the renovations of Harbert Park, which is really amazing based on the work of our staff, and that's going to be at Kabul House on Dempster Street beginning at 7 o'clock. And I think those are all my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Braithwaite. Alderman Wilson. Alderman Ruth Simmons.
Just to echo Alderman Fleming and everyone else that's mentioned about the tax assessments, I have shared the details on our Facebook page. I'm encouraging everyone to go. I was planning for a referral, but I think I will wait until this meeting on Thursday and talk to Commissioner Sufferton to find out more details, and then come with a more clear ask of staff on how we can support our residents. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Mr. Mayor, Alderman Ruth Simmons and I did speak. I would like to go ahead and put something on for the 8th. Anyway, because I think we need to, by then I think we'll have a better sense of things. Commissioner Sufferton indicated that the assessor was going to be putting out some general information, dollars and cents information citywide. So we'll just go ahead and put something on for the 8th under city manager announcements, and I think that's a good next step, because I agree with all of you. This is something we're going to be inundated with, and I think whatever we can do to support our residents, we should. So we'll go ahead and put it on for the 8th.
Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Sufferton.
Sure. In addition to the meeting upcoming this week, on Thursday, March 28th at 3 Crowns, the Central Street Neighbors Association will be having their annual meeting at 7 p.m. And the headliner is Assessor Fritz Kagi. So I'd like to encourage people to attend, and it's limited to the first 150 people for space reasons, but anybody who would like to meet the man himself, I would say be at 3 Crowns Thursday, March 28th at 7 p.m.
Thank you. Alderman Rainey.
Yes, could we please have the assessor meeting on Thursday televised? It's going to be in this room. Yeah.
Yep.
Please, thank you. And will you advertise that it's going to be televised? Oh, thank you.
Okay.
And may I say one more thing about that? I'm sorry, and I know a lot about the assessment process now. We have Mitzi, I pronounce it wrong, Mitzi Gibbs. Mitzi Gibbs, yes. And so she is wonderful, but poor thing's going to just be overworked the next month. So I just want to make sure that and I don't know that she doesn't, but I just want to make sure she has the appropriate supports to field the phone calls and the questions that are going to be coming in over the next month while the city of Evanston has an open tax appeal window.
That is so true.
Thank you. We also, as a city, put out an article that was in the current issue of the Evanston Roundtable about this in anticipation that this was going to happen. So there's resources mentioned in that article as well. Patrick Degnan put that out for us. All right. Alderman Wilson, can you lead us into executive session?
Sure. And
excuse me for 1 second.
Members of the council will pass on execs tonight. So we just need to adjourn.
You okay with that?
Oh.
We don't need to cover the one thing.
No, we can cover it offline.
Okay, no complaints here.
Is that okay with people?
I'll just finish up by saying I would live in Sisleyville if that was a thing. I'm saying
as soon as somebody else lives there, they'd be complaining about something.
I would be a very good resident. I would compromise.
All right, then I'm taking a motion to adjourn. All right, all in favor? All right, thank you everybody for the hearty debate and everybody for coming out. Good night.